We would just want to thank you so very, very much from the bottom of our hearts for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here with us today for this very necessary and serious conference. So I would like to introduce one of my co-masters of ceremony.
Partners in crime.
Yes, partners in crime, Mr. Terry King.
Thank you, Belinda. As all of you may not notice, there's some books out in the lobby, the orange books, has my name on the front cover of it. I have one for everyone in here. Please feel free to take one. It's a story about how Belinda and I first met, but I develop alternative housing strategies for corrupt government officials, and I put together a guidebook on how other people can send corrupt politicians to jail as well, as Belinda and I did.
Yes.
So I hope y'all enjoy it and hope you get good information out of it.
And it has already been autographed, and he is also, the new book? A second book is coming out here shortly, and we will make sure that everyone have the opportunity to receive that book too as well. Terry King has led the Criminal Justice Task Force team for Louisiana United International for about 10 years now, over 10 years. And we have done some phenomenal work, and we would just love for you all to read that book and really understand what this type of work is really all about. That's why we're, we're so pleased to have you here today to be a part of this conference. So thank you again. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Dr. Manning, could you come up and do the invocation, please?
At this time, would you stand with me as we ask the blessing upon our gathering at this time? Whatever faith you are a part of, we must join together because unity is very powerful. Now, somebody said amen. Unity is very powerful. We are stronger together than we ever will be apart. And a house divided cannot stand. Oh God, as we meet in this place, we ask for your covering, oh God. We ask that you would do mightily and incredibly more than we ever thought or even asked for. God, that there would be great transformation in this place. God, we come thanking you that you have trusted us to be here. God, that as we gather here, that you will speak into us truth. That truth will be revealed and we will be equipped by it in order that we may go and teach one another. That we may leave from this place in order that we might convince others that the truth is more powerful than a lie. That deceit cannot stand. That light is always more powerful than darkness. And so, God, today we ask that you would just illuminate every word that is spoken by our scholars and scientists and artists, God. Let it be elevated and illuminated in our minds so that we may leave compelled and motivated to speak truth and to be truth tellers. So, God, in that regard, we ask today that we would begin to make America honest again. God, we know that truth is under attack, but today we come to defeat every lie, every dishonest thing that has been said, every foul word that's been spoken against democracy, every foul word that's been spoken against our heroes, both Martin Luther King and JFK. God, we come standing against all lies so that the truth might be revealed. And we believe that we will go forth today declaring it in the mighty name of our God, and the truth will win. We ask all of these things in the name of our mighty God and powerful Creator, and I ask it in the name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Well, truth be told, I'm not near the orator that Dr. Manning is. To start our program today, we had originally asked Bobby Kennedy Jr. to address us via video. However, that didn't work out. So now we have Patrick Kennedy, who will be discussing the opening remarks. So your attention, please.
Good evening. Well, I'm unable to join you in celebrating the grand opening of the exhibit JFK's Magnificent Journey by Alan Solarian. I'm honored to be able to speak to you tonight. I first want to thank Ms. Hatch, President of the Women's National Democratic Club, and all of the members who have played a part in organizing this evening's event. First, of course, I want to thank Dr. Alan Solarian for his enormous artistic contribution. As many of us know, my uncle's life touched many people from around the world. His reach really knew no boundaries as people all over the world mourned his tragic death. And there's no greater testament to this fact than the artist himself, who lived in Istanbul during the time of my uncle's death, but understood the enormity of what had befallen the American president. Through the years, many people have tried to better understand the human capacity for greatness. And I'm honored that Dr. Solarian has chosen to revive his artistic abilities to explore that greatness in my uncle through his works. My uncle's work will always persist. As we always work to ensure peace and social justice and equality, people will remember the work that my uncle did to call forth a better society. As we view these paintings, I hope you too will enjoy the provocative recreations of well-known pictorial moments of our 35th president, my uncle, John F. Kennedy. Finally, let me take this opportunity to speak a moment about Dr. Solarian's other work in the field of mental health. This is the new era of civil rights for those with mental illness and addiction. And Dr. Solarian's work has been noted for the cutting-edge research that he's done in the area of addiction. It truly is the stigma and the shame that plagued earlier fights against those who would otherwise relegate people to the shadows of our society. And in a sense, it is not only a public health issue, but it's a civil rights issue. And so I want to thank him for his work and call on everybody this evening to be part of a movement to bring mental health into overall health so that we can finally treat the whole person in our healthcare system. And if it should be the case that our healthcare bill is still being debated in Congress, I would ask all of you to be sure that you advocate for full parity in healthcare coverage within our healthcare bill, seeing as though it is absolutely integral to the treatment of the whole person. With that plug, I would like to thank all of you once again for inviting me to speak to you this evening and in honoring Dr. Solarian for not only his artistic abilities, but to pay tribute to the professional life that he has led as well. Thank all of you for the great work that you do to promote the Democratic Party and its ideals of social justice and equality, and please keep up the great work. Thank you very much.
Dr. Alan Solarian. Dr. Solarian was Medical Director Emeritus for the FBI. He's a former Associate Professor of Psychiatry at George Washington University School of Medicine, and he's a student of the JFK assassination research. Dr. Solarian?
I just want to let you all know that you're going to be captivated by Dr. Solarian and the passion, the intense passion that he has for the great work that he do. Come on, Dr. Solarian.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you, everybody, for being here and coming. This conference is really a credit to some very special people. All I consider human and American treasures, and they are next to us. It's Professor Fetzer, Jim Fetzer, David Mantik, Jerry Corsi, and later Ralph Singh. They are the ones who scientifically exposed the truth and let us know what really happened to us. And the purpose of this conference, which is partly my imagination, partly my pain from realizing and reading how the most sacred, beautiful humans suffered. I also experienced that on my own skin. I don't see my family here. They're scared. They're embarrassed. They're ashamed because I'm a conspiracy theorist. I don't blame them. I understand their fears. But the truth, the scientific truth, is the answer. And the changes that we're enjoying now through Bobby Kennedy, and all the credit goes to Bobby Kennedy, but passing and opening the records, JFK and MLK records, for us to know what happened is based upon the scientific truth and advances discovered by the very people in this room. And thank you, my friends. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, David. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now what do I do? Do I go? Oh.
Testing. Okay, we're going to take about a few minutes to open it up for questions for Dr. Solarian. So, do anyone have any questions?
Was Alan Dulles involved?
And that's a $6 million question. Yes, of course. He was involved, and he was one of the architects, main architects of JFK assassination. It's a great question.
Any more questions?
Regarding Alan Dulles, in 1963, in the summer, Alan paid a visit to the LBJ Ranch. Now, why would he do that? He was no longer in office. Remember, he had been fired by JFK because of the Bay of Pigs. Why is Alan Dulles visiting the LBJ Ranch in the summer of 1963? Not too long before JFK was shot.
It's a brilliant question and observation for the same reason that Alan Dulles was spending the night on November 22nd, 1963, at the CIA, at a secret house, but CIA house. And why did Alan Dulles vanish in the most critical hours of Bay of Pigs invasion? He was in charge. But that night, during the operation, JFK wanted to contact Allen Dulles. He was unavailable. So, thank God he confessed his crimes later. But again, it's a long story. It takes a lot of work to read what really happened. Go ahead.
Okay, we're going to take a couple more questions.
How are you, sir? I live in New Orleans. I came here for a meeting to talk about truth, and I wound up here. I'm excited to, and people are doing this. And here are the 2 points. Number one is that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the only relative in his family who wanted to allow Sirhan Hussein to get parole. Does anybody want to talk about why that is? Number two, we now have the files that have been released. And number three, our governor seems to be close to the president. Maybe our governor would share the fact that, again, in Jackson, Louisiana, where the research was done by the groups that did to make sure we could find a way to get cancer, to kill Castro, to figure that out, and that whole thing and how it led to the issue of how the whole game of Oswald and things were going on at that point, to honor the fact that it happened in Jackson, Louisiana, and inmates were poisoned to test and they died in that experiment that was linked to the government. And the third thing is that, I hope I'm not at risk or anything, but if they're going to have a negotiation with Putin, how about letting us know how a man from New Orleans could go to the Marines and go to Russia, come back with a Russian wife, and everything was okay? Maybe the Russians have some things to tell us about. What's your comments on that?
I think it's
Wow,
a beautiful
that's a lot.
observation, but there's one word about Lee Harvey Oswald, a brilliant man, very smart man. At the age of 17, do you know anybody from Louisiana who would speak fluent Russian so well that his future wife, Marina, thought he was Russian-born? Wow. Okay, well, do you know anybody in Louisiana who speaks Russian? All right? And I was 17, my boy, Lee Harvey Oswald, was speaking fluent Russian. That's it. So
Okay,
we
we're
have
gonna take-
doubts. But no, forget about doubts and circumstantial evidence. Let's get serious. Please listen to my heroes here, to Jim Fetzer and David Mantic, because they have proven, and Jerome Corsi, they have
And we will be bringing them up
scientifically
next.
proven that, thank you, they have proven that Lee Harvey Oswald
Yes.
was not the killer, that it took 7 people to kill our president, and we also know that the president was poisoned during the assassination, during the ambush. But these are long discussions, so the truth is obvious now thanks to our colleagues here. So let's listen to them when it's their turn.
Thank you, Dr. Solari. If it's okay, we're going to take one more question, then we're going to have them come up. Mr. King is ready to introduce our next speaker. One more question.
You brought the Dulles brothers. So would you agree that this set this bowl of wax, this thing in motion with the, I want to call it, what was it called? It was Chiquita Banana Company, and that they set up an entire peninsulary system in South America that we struggling today with trying to fix as a country.
I can't get the question. What is the question?
Did the Dulles brothers, Allen and his brother, who was the CIA and the Secretary of State, set up a monetary system that enriched themselves in South America by setting up almost a caste system, kind of like the ancient peninsulas of Spain. And it's almost still in existence till today.
Wow.
It is absolutely true what you're saying. And again, I'm going to rely on my professor friends who have done the research to prove the lies and more lies from the CIA. But one thing about Allen Dulles, he was a genius. He was a great chess player, his brother too. And he set the system up. He was so marvelous, he put Mac Bundy in the White House, and Mac Bundy was a Dulles protege who ended up as JFK's national security advisor. And he single-handedly, history will know, sabotaged. And he was one of the architects. And so, that's the long answer.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Solarian.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Thank you so very much, and thank you for all that you do and all that you have done to make this conference happen for us so that people can know the real truth about what's really going on. Thank you, Dr. Solarian. We're going to have Mr. Terry King introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Belinda. Thank you, Dr. Solarian. Our next speaker is Dr. Jim Coursey. Dr. Coursey is a member of, received his PhD from the Harvard University Department of Government. He's published over 30 books on economics, history, politics, and 6 of those have become New York Times bestsellers. He co-authored the final analysis, and if you're in the room here, there's some out on the table out there, presenting indisputable forensic evidence that 2 shots were fired from the front and 1 shot fired from the rear that killed the president in Dealey Plaza crossfire. This was exposed to a 60-year cover-up by the CIA, the FBI, the Pentagon, and the Secret Service. So without further ado, Dr. Coursey, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you all very much. This is the book with David Mantik. David will be presenting it shortly, The Final Analysis, The Assassination of John F. Kennedy, The Final Analysis. And David, we co-authored it, and David will be presenting it in detail. I'm going to leave that to him. It really is his research that he did of the X-rays, the JFK X-rays. He's seen them more than anyone else and did optical density measurements of the X-rays, which is measuring the light coming through the X-rays in very minute detail, so you can tell exactly what is in the X-rays. And as pointed out, all 3 of the X-rays that exist in the archives are altered to mask evidence of frontal shots, and there's clear evidence of 2 frontal shots and 1 shot from the rear, with none of the trajectories of the shots coming from the Texas School Book Depository. Now, I'm going to do this is in a sense the keynote speech, and I'm going to do a presentation here, a slide presentation, showing you more of the range of lies that we've been told over many, many years. And I think you're going to find this to be very interesting because the government has consistently lied with the backup of the mainstream media to give us false narratives hiding the government's complicity in really evil activities that have changed the course of history. And this is nothing new. It goes back in history, probably to ancient times, but it's time that it be exposed and stopped, and that's really what we're resolved to do here in this conference. And let me move over to the side here and start showing you the slides we prepared. Okay, can you hear me on this microphone? Wait a second. Can you pick me up now? I think that's pretty. Can you pick me up now on the microphone? Okay, good. The slides begin, of course, with the JFK assassination, and we have here a video. I'm going to play just a couple of minutes of the video, which shows you again how the mainstream media gets stuck into the typical narrative that we hear all the time about Lee Harvey Oswald being the killer of Jack Kennedy. Okay, here's the video. If we can start playing it. Oh, well. Back here. It doesn't seem to be playing. Can you? Okay. What the video shows is, again, saying that, you know, the only, they say a very small percentage of the population.
While riding in a motorcade through Dealey Plaza. Now, in the decades since, historians have written books and about that day. There have also been movies created, songs written. Even the spot where the shooting happened remains a popular tourist destination to this day. Historians we spoke with say that enduring doubt surrounding the official version of events is part of why it continues to have such a hold on Americans.
We're stuck with, the government offering people an implausible explanation. JFK endures as a symbol of people's lack of faith in government. So that's why it's so important.
The National Archives finished its review of classified files related to the JFK assassination earlier this year and says 99% of the records have been made publicly available. But the fact that even some documents remain withheld or redacted fuels skepticism. Polls, in fact, show as many as 60% of Americans still do not believe that the late suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald, acted alone.
All right, now that concludes almost as an assumption that we should believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin. And I think what we've seen is the research that's been produced makes it clear that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the lone gun assassin. I doubt he fired a single shot that day. But the documents that remain hidden have got to be explosive in one way or another. And Donald Trump was even dissuaded by Mike Pompeo, who was at that time running the CIA, from releasing the final documents. Now, Donald Trump has again signed as president an order demanding the release of these documents, and we're waiting to see if the bureaucracy continues to try to hide some things. But I think the remaining documents are going to make it clear that Lee Harvey Oswald was working with the FBI and the CIA at the time of the assassination, and that Lyndon Johnson was very involved in planning and approving of the assassination. But it's not just the Kennedy assassination. Everything changed that day. For those of us who were alive, I was 17 years old, everything changed. America changed. And then when Robert Kennedy was assassinated, it was again an affirmation that the country could not tolerate the truth that Robert Kennedy and Jack Kennedy were trying to tell. They were peacemakers. And our CIA, our military establishment, which we've been warned about by President Eisenhower in his farewell speech, the military-industrial, mainstream media complex, along with all the bankers and those who manufacture munitions, have wanted war. And we saw it, I'm going to skip a little bit of this because we saw it again with the Martin Luther King assassination. And we still have not held the truth. Congress did not even hold hearings they held hearings on the Martin Luther King assassination. I have a set of the volumes, and there's more unanswered questions than answered questions. That's what the hearings demonstrate. There were not hearings on Robert Kennedy's assassination. In fact, much of the evidence has been destroyed in Los Angeles. But it's clear all three of these assassinations were not what we were told they were to be. I'm going to skip over this, but there are various broadcasts at the time that show, again, all of the missing pieces, the questions that are unanswered, that have been raised, the pieces that don't fit together. Now, this is 9/11, and you can see that's Building 7, the World Trade Center. It was not hit by an airplane, but yet it came down. And in fact, there's video. We'll see if we can get it to show here. There's video at the time. Let's see if we can get the next slide to come up. There's video of the BBC was broadcasting that the Building 7 had fallen before it came down.
The latest building collapse in New York, you might have heard a few moments ago, was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. I'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse? Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
That's what you would hope, because this whole downtown area behind me has been completely sealed off and evacuated, apart from the emergency workers. That was done by the mayor, Rudy Giuliani, much earlier.
You can see Building 7 is still standing behind her, yet she's reporting it had collapsed.
Reporting the collapse of a building while it's still standing bolt upright in plain view, well, just once is bad enough. To do it at least 4 times might be deemed careless, and that's what we're meant to believe. But World Trade Center Building 7, also known as the Salomon Brothers Building, fell at 5:20 p.m. Not an hour before, not half an hour or 20 minutes before, but when it did finally fall. Not struck by any aeroplane, or engulfed by a raging inferno, it hit the ground within 7 seconds. It would take US authorities 7 years to announce it fell due to normal office fires, in a report now proven to be riddled with lies and fraud. We all believed in a fairy tale once.
It's impossible that a building that had not yet fallen was reported to have been fallen before it fell, unless there was intelligence that was known at the time. And again, the lies go on. So we see in the 2020 election that the counting, Donald Trump was leading throughout the evening, and then in 7 states the counting stopped. So Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, these states stopped counting. And when they started, all these mail-in ballots were produced and run through the machines. And suddenly when the counting started, the blue line, which was Biden's count, jumped up above Trump. People went to bed saying that Trump was going to be president. When they woke up in the morning, Biden was leading, and then Biden won. But of course, you couldn't question whether that was voter fraud. If you did, you were accused of insurrection. Note the power of the CIA, all the intelligence operations we have. We've got a Defense Intelligence Agency. We've got the National Security Agency. We've got a whole series of government agencies whose job is to spy and to lie. And they're good at it. If we
are getting even higher in the critical midterm elections, 4 states are becoming new battlegrounds for former President Trump's false claims that he really won the 2020 election. GOP election deniers are on the ballot in the attorney general races in key states right now. If they win, it could provide political cover to Trump should he run again in 2024. NBC News political reporter Adam Edelman is joining us now. Adam, what's the significance of these election deniers running for this particular job, for the attorney general post in these different states? What kind of power would they have over future elections?
So to put it simply, if they win, they'd serve as their state's top law enforcement officers and would thusly have the power to use that office to tilt the outcome of presidential elections. State AGs have the ability to launch or defend against election lawsuits. That's really what is at the heart of this, such as one seeking to include or challenge various ballots. And that can obviously ultimately affect how and which votes are or are not counted. State AGs also provide legal guidance to election officials across the state on how to interpret state policies governing elections and maintain prosecutorial powers for election fraud, voter intimidation, and other election crimes. All of that really amounts to a very significant amount of power that has a direct effect on who could be declared and certified the winner in a state like Georgia.
And Adam, it's not just the attorney general job. There are other races that we're seeing with these election deniers trying to win as well, right?
That's right. Not only attorney general, but there are governor races, and in many states, secretary of state races. All three of these positions really kind of constitute a trio of elected officials who oversee, administer, defend, and certify elections and election results. And like you mentioned, we've seen election deniers running in many states, including crucial battlegrounds like Arizona, Michigan, and Georgia for all three races. You know, for example, in Georgia tomorrow, all three are on the ballot. Governor Brian Kemp, who resisted pressure from Donald Trump to overturn the 2020 race, faces a challenge from David Perdue, a 2020 election denier. Incumbent Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who explicitly resisted pressure from Donald Trump to overturn the 2020 race, faces a challenge from Jody Hice, an election denier. And Attorney General Chris Carr faces a long shot bid from John Gordon, another election denier. Any number of the election deniers having a victory could really throw into question the integrity of the election results in future elections, including 2024.
Okay, so you've got a situation here. We have the pandemic. I showed a slide on the pandemic.
Misinformation is dangerous to.
If we can show that, please. I'll get to the Hunter Biden laptop. I want to go back to of course, all these intelligence agents. These were heads of various of the intelligence agencies. They all combined to say the Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. Okay, well, I've been involved in a couple of these. In the Russian disinformation Mueller investigation, I was involved. I played a role and have worked to support Donald Trump's all three of his elections. And in 2016, I played a very influential role working with Roger Stone. And what I had done was, at the end of the election, Julian Assange had emails that were stolen from the Democratic National Committee. The first round of them he released just as the Democratic National Committee started on Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the head of the Democratic National Committee, had to resign the day the Democratic National Convention was scheduled to start because the evidence from Assange showed that Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Hillary Clinton had colluded so Bernie Sanders would not win the nomination. And then Assange said he had a second group of emails and that he was going to release them before the election. And the Russian collusion case came down to whether there was a combination of collusion between Assange and the Trump campaign to release those emails to most hurt Hillary Clinton, who was running against Trump for president in 2016. Well, I had figured out that Assange had Podesta's emails and he was going to release them. And I told this to Roger Stone. But I did not have a source. It was simply I had studied Podesta. I knew that whoever stole those emails, the important ones, would have been Podesta's, and I knew what was in them, would be in them, just simply from surmising. So the Mueller investigation felt that I had a role, and I was their last witness. They said if I didn't tell them who my source was with Assange, they were going to put me in front of a jury in Washington, D.C. and put me in prison the rest of my life. Or I could take a plea deal and say I had lied and hidden my tie to Julian Assange, and they would treat me lightly. Well, as I prayed on it, I decided I could not swear before a judge and God to a lie to keep myself out of prison. So I told them I would not take their plea deal, and they should just prepare to put me in jail the rest of my life. I didn't have a tie to Julian Assange, and they couldn't find one. They did not indict me. Instead, they closed the Russian collusion investigation. And I had a meeting with Giuliani. He said that he and President Trump discussed it. And had I taken the plea deal, the Mueller investigation would have made their case against Donald Trump. Because they did not take the plea deal. I mean, it was a horrible time of my life. I'm still suffering, family disruption from it. It was miserable financially. My wife of 32 years divorced me. It ruins your life to go through these, but I did not swear to a lie, and I was not indicted. Okay, now, with I'm not going to play Jim Jordan. Again, I want to kind of save some of the time here. The J6ers are another. They were insurrectionists because they went to protest. We're going to learn a lot more about this. It was really an entrapment scheme where the again, the deep state was bringing in busloads of people dressed as if they were really Antifa and Black Lives Matter protesters or professional protesters. They were paid to be there, mixing in with the patriots in order to create violence and entering the Capitol. And these people have been in jail, many of them for 4 years without trial. They were just pardoned by President Trump and are mostly out of jail. Okay, and I'm going to skip another here. More and more lies. It goes on. When we invaded Iraq, Colin Powell told the United Nations that we had weapons of mass destruction. That was, Saddam Hussein had them. We never found any. He was later apologized for this speech.
Every statement.
Gulf of Tonkin incident, where they said we were being attacked by the Vietnamese Navy, our naval ships in the Gulf of Tonkin to start the Vietnam War. The Vietnamese did not have naval ships. It was, again, another lie. It goes on and on. Chemtrails are the list of lies is just enormous that we've been told. I want to conclude with this. We've created a foundation, which is God's 5 Stones. You can see it up there. It's G-O-D-S with no apostrophe. You spell out 5, F-I-V-E, and stones is plural. And what we found is that there are these codes in the Board of Election records across the country. And what these codes are is if you have the passwords, if you're the criminals, you can create fictitious voters. Then go to the DMZ and get them addresses. Then you can vote them. They get official state IDs and they look like real voters, but they're all fraudulent. In Wisconsin, in a record of 9 million voters, there are 2 million same name voters. We get down to same name, same phone, and same name and same email. We get almost 900,000 duplicate records, which are all criminally there. And so when we've been exposing this at God's 5 Stones, and we're right now I'm working with President Trump's attorney, Peter Titkin. Peter Titkin went to high school with Donald Trump. They were both in military school. They've known each other since they were 17. Peter Titkin is now working with us. Andrew Paquette is the genius who found these algorithms. And what we have begun doing, first of all, the algorithms were not used in 2024 in the battleground states because we had found them and exposed them. Now what we're doing is we're developing cases in Florida. There's 2 cases, one in the District 14, which is a race by Rocky Rockford. He lost running for the House seat. But we can prove, again, the fictitious voters coming at the last minutes were the reasons why he lost. Suddenly in Florida, there were these extraordinary number of requests for ballots because, see, the criminals running these schemes know how many ballots they need to create to win an election. And they just print ballots within the machines. So I say there's no surge at the polls for the Democrats. The surge is occurring in the computers. Okay, so once we have a case of that nature, we're going to also file a case in Tallahassee saying that the Florida state database of voters is so corrupt with duplicate false that it's not repairable. And this is the case across the country. If we don't get these algorithms out of these databases by the midterm elections, I'm sure the Democrats will try to steal the House and Senate. These have been in the state databases since 2004 and 2007. So I'm questioning how many elections were won by the algorithms, and House of Representatives and senators were there not because the people elected them, but because the criminals elected them. We cannot let the intelligence agencies run our elections the way our intelligence agencies murdered a president. Thank you.
Wow. Let's give him a hand. Thank you, Dr. Corsi. Take the stage for questions for Q&A. Tracy Riley, Major Tracy Riley, retired, is going to take that into the room, and we're ready for questions. Give him another hand. That was a phenomenal presentation. Thanks again, Dr. Corsi.
Thank you.
Tracy.
Before we begin questions from the floor, would you indulge me to ask one?
Yes, you go right ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Major Tracy Riley, U.S. Army retired, logistician over 24 years, 12 active and 12 as a reservist.
Thank you for your service.
It's my pleasure. I've had one foot on the civilian sector and the other foot in military operations, so I have a very unique perspective on this journey we call life in this country in particular. The poster I saw relating to the Vietnam era war. As a volunteer of a local Veterans of Foreign War post, of which my husband, the other Major Riley, is the commander, I spend countless hours each week with veterans specifically of that era who have been overlooked. I'm reminded because I saw Mr. McNamara, who created the McNamara Project 100,000, which engaged in the practice of bringing in people with mental illnesses, with physical disabilities, folks who should not have been brought into the military because of their unfitness, but were used as cannon fodder nonetheless and put on the front lines to absorb a lot of the very lethal attacks against our veterans. My question is, knowing that 50 years later this was an actual practice, how has the military, what has your information revealed to you? How the military veterans who are drafted, forced into active duty, how have those human beings been used in some of the information that has been revealed to you in terms of misrepresented to the population? Have we been lied to as well?
Yeah, I've got a couple of, first of all, yes, you've been lied to as well. I want to acknowledge that all the military I've met have fought from their hearts honestly for freedom and have fought for the United States of America. That they've been lied to is not their fault. That they died in wars that should never have been fought is this military-industrial complex and mainstream media complex pushing wars. I think the war in Ukraine should never have been fought. I think, again, in the Middle East, we have solutions. We have nations who are willing to come forward with very positive solutions. Donald Trump, I think, is trying to think out of the box and solve these wars. War only perpetuates war. And I go back to Smedley Butler, who was a soldier in the Philippines. After World War I, he wrote a book called All War is a Racket. It only benefits the military-industrial complex and the bankers. And these wars are propped up by propaganda campaigns that lie to us. It goes back to World War I lying to us. But the point is that I'm working now with the military and with the veterans. We are Joshua Messias and Derek Strom, who were both involved, supporting President Trump in this election. And what they want to do and what I want to do is I want to start utilizing their foundation so that we can have exit strategies for the military after service. Some 20 military a day commit suicide. The homelessness among our former military is a disgrace. We want to see the military have a path out of the military to housing, to jobs. They have skills that can be used, and we want to combine industry to be the exit strategy. They built a whole complex in Florida with apartment buildings for the ex-military to move into, with psychological services and get them back into society in a useful way. And so it's essential that we respect our former military, and it's essential that we tell the truth and do not lie about wars that we want fought for economic reasons that benefit just a few, the deep state. And so it's essential that we get the truth out about the Kennedy assassination. We open the files. I think we should end government secrecy. Last, my solution to the bureaucracy is move the entire federal bureaucracy to Death Valley and let them have all the solar power they want and all the wind turbines. And if they don't like that, they can quit. And then we should take all the buildings in Washington, D.C. and convert them into housing for the former military.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question. Stand up.
Thank you for that question, by the way.
My question has to do with the presidential certification of the 2020 election. If what you're saying is true, there's only a relatively few possibilities. Either the Republican secretaries of state that certified the elections in their state were secret agents for Democrats, either they were or incompetent or corrupt. Can you comment?
Well, maybe a combination of all three. But certainly the point is that every one of, we've been looking at as God's five stones, every single state official board of election records that we see have in them these codes which are of a intelligence grade complexity. And they all have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of duplicate false names. And you can find these, it's like a card marking scheme. They hide these false names back in the database, so if you look at it, you know, you've got the password, you can take Jerome Corsi and you can create Stuart Corsi and you can create Mary Corsi and 10 of them and go get addresses for them at the DMV. And then these moles, these worms, are in the database, so all you have to do is use the passwords and say they want a mail-in ballot, and the machine prints it, and it's counted as if it were real because it has the same number on it for the voter. But all these Corsis each have a different voter ID, although they're all me, because they were all cloned off of my record. And this is rampant, and we've got to get rid of it. I have not found a state. I will be in Georgia on the 24th of this month, and I will be there talking with the legislature. I've been invited to in Wisconsin. I've been producing videos on this, and our election system, our disgrace, because that's the way the politicians want it. Okay, you miss a payment on a credit card, you know about it. Okay, you get your seat on an assignment for an airplane on your cell phone. Well, there's not somebody else sitting in your seat. These systems can work, but I suggest that what we do is we take the system that works for credit cards and airplanes and we use it for voting, and we take the voting system and use it for credit cards. That way everybody have all the credit cards you want, you never have to pay anything. The system is rigged and it's completely criminal. I think, again, the intelligence agencies, and they do not want you questioning it, otherwise you're an insurrectionist. Okay, so all these state officials certify these elections without an official forensic examination. Are the mail-in ballots folded? Wow. Do they actually go through the mail? Do the signatures match the registration signatures? Why are there so many false registrations that we can prove are in the database? And so we are working with the president's attorney, and there will be not only civil cases brought, but as soon as we have a Department of Justice and an FBI head, we now have Pam Bondi, I'm assuming it will be Kash Patel, we're going into the Department of Justice for criminal cases, and I think some of these will be treasonous.
Wow, Dr. Corsi, we have two more questions, and we have to move on.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to breathe before I ask this question. First, again, my name is Reverend Gregory T. Manning, and I do need to say that I am an elected member of the Orleans Parish Democratic Executive Committee, and so it's a little troublesome for me to hear some of your words, with all due respect. I want to start by asking this question. There was a gentleman who point blank shot a CEO of an insurance company in New York City outside the a hotel. Do you know his name?
I vaguely recall the case, but I don't have the specifics really in memory. I don't recall.
Do you all know his name? Mangione.
Mangione, okay.
Then there was a...
Oh, yes, I recall the case, yes.
Yeah. Then there was another man that supposedly attempted to assassinate Donald Trump when his ear was hit. Do you know his name? It's kind of funny that we all know Mangione's name, but we don't know his name. I just wanted to make that point, first of all. Second of all, on January 6th, I was alarmed when I turned on the television to see people who were breaking down windows, who were accosting police officers, who were erecting a noose and saying, "Hang Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States," to see an African-American police officer using his baton to fight off people that were chasing him up the stairs. And I stand to say that these people were indeed insurrectionists. I witnessed it for myself, and so I'm asking you, and what I also saw were people who were members of white supremacist groups called the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, who have been revealed to be members of those white supremacist groups doing this attack, being coerced and compelled and motivated by Donald Trump to go on attack and to fight like hell at the Capitol. And I saw it for myself. Knew also that they defecated all over the Capitol. And so I'm wondering how you move to stand and say that these people were simply protesting and that they, unless I heard you wrong, I just want to make sure that you're saying that they were not insurrectionists, but they were protesters.
Well, Reverend, thank you for your question, and I have great respect for you. I think you're going to find in the next bit of time that what you were watching was like a Truman Show. In other words, you're going to find that much of what we've seen, just like we were told Lee Harvey Oswald killed President Trump, these intelligence agencies create an image for you and project it with the media and a narrative that it makes it look a certain way. You're going to find, I think, in the next few weeks, and by the way, the number of people lawyering up right now in Washington, D.C. from the former bureaucracy or the current bureaucracy is enormous. You're going to find that these were a setup group, that this was in a sense, an entrapment scheme. A lot of the people you saw as protesters were paid protesters by the government, were brought in buses that day, and were given uniforms to wear that made them look like protesters. That the Capitol Police were encouraged to open the Capitol. A lot of the violence you saw was violence perpetrated by people who, in fact, were federal agents. Now, I think this has been, I've certainly worked extensively with the J6ers and have seen the evidence, and the American public's going to start seeing it pretty soon. So I think you're going to be shocked to see the criminal prosecutions that come out of J6, and it will be the government officials who are going to be prosecuted. Just as we're finding U.S. aid, which was created by the Kennedys, Jack Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, which we thought was a great international aid organization, and we find out that it is supporting terrorists around the world, that is supporting various cases that have to do with sexual orientation, LGBTQ, whatever else. And these are issues which are political issues that the government has no business funding without disclosing what they're doing. And so when you see the amount of waste and the reduction of the government that's going to occur, and the criminal prosecutions of government officials, including some very high government officials, you're going to find out the amount of lying that has been going on, and it saddens me to say you will find much of it within the Democratic Party.
Thank you, Doctor. We got
One more thing.
Okay.
I began my life, I was raised in a family that revered Franklin Roosevelt. It saved my grandparents' home. I was raised to be a Democrat. the Democratic Party left me. I was a strong supporter of Martin Luther King. I felt he was on the right track because what he wanted freedom, he wanted equal opportunity. What we're seeing today is an infiltration of a neo-Marxist and cultural Maoism influence into the Democratic Party. Democratic Party, in my opinion, has become a communist party. And I wrote a book on this called Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. And the critical race theory that's been produced is an evolution of Marxist philosophy and theology that was informed by the Frankfurt School, people like Herbert Marcuse, made into a sexual revolution. It was designed to destroy traditional American culture, break up the family, reduce belief in God, create dissension, have constant crises, constant wars. Once you open your eyes to the reality and the magnitude of a determination to create a new world order in which we're the slaves, you're going to see a different reality. But sir, I do appreciate that it is not an easy process, and I encourage you to look at the facts as they're adduced, rather than a political image you've been shown, which matches some preconceived ideas you might have. The truth here is going to be jarring, but the truth is going to be, as the Bible says, the disinfectant that we need in order, nothing, as it says biblically, no lie is going to remain a lie, for all lies will be exposed. And the disinfectant is the light of truth. And I'm here I'm as equally opposed to the Republicans. I do not want these algorithms removed so Republicans win. I want them so our elections are fair, because if we do not have voter integrity, we have nothing. This is not a Republican effort. Although I think in the recent elections that have been stolen, you're going to find that the Trump administration is going to expose this, and you're going to see some criminal prosecutions that are going to be difficult to watch until you realize that many of the new age ideas you've been fed have been predicated on intelligence agency constructed counterintelligence lies. So I encourage everyone here in the spirit of this group to have our standard be honesty and the truth, and I'm happy to live by the truth. Thank you.
Can we take just the last question? She's ambitious.
Thank you. I thought that this was a really interesting presentation, and I have so many questions that I would love to ask, but I'm going to try to be brief. Okay, so when you talk about neo-Marxists in the left and with Democrats, it makes me wonder to the extent, and I guess I'm kind of resounding what the brother was saying over there, about the neo-Nazis that are coming out of the Republican Party, that are emboldened by Musk giving his very like Hail Hitler sign, right, twice, and not redacting it, not clearing it up, as we see DEI, everything that goes for everyone except for white men, being erased out of law, so that it seems like we don't have equal protections. And so I'm wondering, as you're talking about the January 6th protesters, patriots, if you will, when you're talking about those January 6th protesters and telling us that those people may have been hired by the deep state, does that actually account for the neo-Nazis, the Proud Boys, the ones who are violent, white, nationalists, neo-Nazis that want power and that are finding a blanket under the Republican Party? Is that inside of your analysis at all? And additionally, I feel like I would have other things to say that I was interested in that you said, but I do want to hear you speak directly to the neo-Nazis who are finding power in the country right now.
Well, the violence I've seen in the last few years has been Antifa and Black Lives Matter. See, this is, again, the neo-Nazi groups are wildly exaggerated. If you look at the FBI, files, if you let me answer, please. The FBI files, which show that the neo-Nazi groups, for instance, by the Southern Poverty Law Center, are not They're either not large, they're very marginal. There's not these big neo-Nazi parades and neo-Nazi uniforms and militia. The neo-Nazis end up to be aging Catholics like me who like the Latin Mass. When you see, and you will be seeing, the true counterintelligence efforts and propaganda of the mainstream media, and what the Department of Justice was looking at, you're going to see that it was, in fact, an attack, it was a racist attack against white males. The point is, well, you're going to see this. You may not want to watch the evidence. But again, the Kennedy assassination got done by a group of people who did not want to believe that the government could kill the president. And I'm telling you things you might not want to understand, but fundamentally, DEI was not Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King Martin Luther King said, you give us free rights, and we have the ability, we'll win in every sector. I supported that. DEI says, no, we got to have one of this gender, and one of this gender, and one of this gender, and one of this race, and one. These are questions which are impossible to resolve. And it's not a matter of identity that establishes qualification. It's capability to do the job. And that's, in fact, the basis upon which I think you'll find, as these records come out, you're going to find a lot of records you're not going to want to look at coming out. And especially if we can end the classification systems. Now, as to Musk's salute, he was also using sign language for the deaf. There do happen to be symbols of that nature, and I've seen lots of pictures produced of all kinds of people with their arm up. And so he is not a Nazi, and that is not a Nazi salute. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Corsi. Hold up, baby. Thank you, Dr. Corsi. It's getting hot and burning up in here. I love this type of energy that's happening in the room right now. You have done a phenomenal presentation, and I am one to say, just sit tight. It may be tight, but it's right. That's why we're here, to expose the corruption in our government, people. Don't leave, sweetheart. Stay. Keep your kids here. Come back. Have a seat. This is what this is all about. You have to have a seat. We're here to expose government corruption. Transparency is in our government is what we calling for. Honesty, integrity, transparency in our government. And a lot of times when we don't know the truth, we will perish. But the truth is supposed to make you free. And we're here to know the truth. See, some people can't stand the truth. But I'm here to tell you, I know in this world, it's a lot of craziness going on. It's a lot of fake stuff that's going on. It's a lot of unreal and untrue stuff that's happening to us as a people. And this is not about no black or white, no Republican or Democrat. It's about we as human beings here in the United States of America. And I'm here to tell you, I know for a fact that we're being done wrong. Now, Mr. King is going to have something to say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Corsi. Really appreciate the information you provided us. One comment I would like to make. Anybody who's been in the military knows that if that were really an insurrection, they would have killed them.
That's right.
And that's the thing that's kind of shocked me with all of this, is that never really comes out. I was asked numerous times in the days, 8th, 9th of January, about what had happened. I said, I think it was a setup because they didn't have blood running down the steps of the Capitol.
It was a setup, and objecting to an election does not make you an insurrectionist. I can think of a long list of Democrats who objected to elections, including Al Gore in 2000. It's part of our history. Thomas Jefferson had a rancorous presidential election in the early 1800s. Our presidential elections are rancorous. but they have to be honest. You can't have millions of fake voters in the voter rolls and conduct an election. It's got to be changed. And so therefore, we've got to get back to, you know, I've thought Martin Luther King, when he said he did not want race to be the defining issue. He wanted ability. He wanted everybody to be treated as a human being with rights that they have as a human being. Okay, and the New World Order group that you listen to that want, like Harari, one of the authors who says, you know, you cut open a human being, you see the lung and the bones and the heart and the blood. You don't see human rights, it's all a fiction. Well, I think Harari's a fiction. Human rights exist, and all human beings, regardless of race or sex or age, have those rights from God. And that's what we have to get back to respecting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to our next step, I want to make a comment about how Belinda and I have worked, because it seems to complement what's being discussed here now. Belinda and I have very different backgrounds. She came from Detroit by way of New Orleans. I'm from South Louisiana, out in the country. But she and I formed a team to work together in St. Tammany Parish, because at the time when we did this, St. Tammany Parish had the highest incarceration rate in the world. Now, I see all kinds of posters around here about mass incarceration and everything, and it's real. But we got together to try to figure out how to do it, do something about it, because it was important. And we set aside our differences and started working together. Belinda recruited people and brought them to me, and I introduced them to people I knew in law enforcement, because people in law enforcement had tried to put me in jail before I met Belinda. And that didn't work out so well. The coroner went to prison, and then we sent the sheriff and the district attorney to prison. At that time, there were some other changes in Louisiana law, and St. Tammany and Louisiana went from having the highest incarceration rate in the world to just be in the middle of the pack. And it's because we worked together and were able to see that that we needed to address a problem. And so that's the same thing we need to do across America, regardless if you got a D or an R or an I behind your name. Yes, ma'am.
Or if you're a bald-headed white man.
Cracker.
He just gonna make me say cracker, but I'm not gonna say cracker. But the truth, anytime, you know, I just want to say this, and then we're going to bring up our next speaker, and I know we're close to time too, Elizabeth. Thank you for keeping us on track. And I know it's a little tight in here, people, but it's right. Anytime somebody can take your face and put it on top of somebody else's body and make you think it's you. It's a lot of lies and corruption that's going on in our world today. And we're calling for World Honesty Day. We're promoting honesty and integrity and transparency, especially in our leaders. We have to hold these people accountable. They work for us. And if we vote them in, like he said, we got to find out how to figure this thing out, Dr. Corsi, because we know it's some cheating going on. It's some wrongdoing that's happening in the voter elections. I'm a witness. They did it to me. They cheated. I'm not making this up, people. It's real. You know, we used to do it in the classrooms, Professor. You know, you taking, you know, pass out papers and then you make the papers look like the papers that you passed out. People, come on now. It's time for us to stop being dumbed down. So we're going to introduce our next speaker. This is great. And just look, we should have standing room in here. And, you know, everybody don't want the truth. But introduce our next speaker, Mr. Terry King. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Dr. David Mantic. Dr. Mantic proved that the Bethesda Naval Hospital surgeons performed pre-autopsy surgery on JFK's head to remove evidence of the gunshot wounds. Dr. Mantic received his PhD in physics from the University of Wisconsin before attending medical school at the University of Michigan, followed by an internship in oncology at the USC Medical Center in Los Angeles. Dr. Mantic.
Belinda Brown, you are my latest hero. I think you are amazing. And Terry King, even though you claim that you are not related to Martin Luther King, we're still delighted to have you here. Thank you both. And Reverend Manning, I'm sorry, my eyes are blinded by the light. I don't even know if you're still here. I would salute Reverend Manning for speaking his mind. That is what we need in this country, people who are not afraid of speaking their mind. And this ballroom has free speech. One of the rare places in this country today that has free speech. So I am delighted to hear voices with different opinions. There is nothing better for democracy. So we had a wonderful question about RFK a bit ago from this side of the room. Sirhan did not shoot RFK, you know, or did not kill him, I should say. Whether he shot a bullet or not may be a little more questionable, but he did not fire the fatal bullet that hit RFK right behind his ear. That was the deadly shot. It was not Sirhan's shot. How do we know this? Tom Noguchi was the coroner who did the autopsy on RFK. I've spoken to Tom. He actually called me about some of my work in the archives on the JFK assassination. So Tom told me that he did very specific tests that proved that the shot that came in behind the ear, the gun was literally an inch or so from the skin. You all remember the picture of Sirhan. He was not there. Sirhan was in front, so he did not fire that shot. And so Tom Noguchi, to this day, says, I have never said that Sirhan killed RFK. That's the coroner. That's the guy who knows. Now, what went wrong? Why didn't he tell the jury that? Well, we know why he didn't tell the jury. Sirhan's lawyer was being blackmailed. He had committed a serious ethics violation involving, of all people, Johnny Roselli of the Mafia. But Sirhan's lawyer was blackmailed. So at the beginning of the trial, he basically said that Sirhan did it. Is this justice? I wanted to comment also on Mac Bundy. Alan has made a very forceful statement that he believes that Mac Bundy was involved in the assassination of JFK. Well, here's what else you need to know about Mac Bundy. On November 22nd, 1963, you all recall that Air Force One was flying back to Washington, D.C. from Dallas. During that flight, the man to whom LBJ was speaking a good deal of that time was none other than Mac Bundy. Mac Bundy was in the Situation Room in the basement of the White House. And so he and LBJ were in constant communication that afternoon. And you know what else Mac Bundy did that afternoon? He called the flight
from Dallas, and he called the flight from Hawaii where the cabinet officials were returning. And you know what he told them? He told them that Oswald did it. What? Did Mac have all the information from Dallas when he did that? Mac Bundy was one of the smartest men you've ever seen in Washington, D.C. He knew what was going on. He was no idiot. And yet he called both planes and told them that Oswald did it. In fact, Oswald wasn't officially charged until the next day, but Mac Bundy knew already. You should also know that Allen Dulles and Mac Bundy worked together as colleagues way back in 1948 for the Marshall Plan. You know who else worked with him? E. Howard Hunt. In case you don't know that name, he was involved in Watergate, and many people suspect he played some role in the JFK assassination. Now, think for a minute about the Bay of Pigs. Who planned that? Richard Bissell was the primary planner for the Bay of Pigs. Do you know who was Richard Bissell's disciple while he was at Harvard? It was none other than Mac Bundy. Mac Bundy and Richard Bissell together helped to plan the Bay of Pigs, and we all know how that turned out. One comment about 9/11 as well. Remember, 9/11 occurred in the year 2001. The report, the 9/11 report, came out in 2004. Do you know what year the report on Building 7 came out? 2008. Because they didn't do a very good job of it in 2004. They had to do another report in 2008. And that report has been widely torn apart as well, in case you haven't read about it. Anyway, none of this is my job today. I'm supposed to talk to you about the JFK autopsy. You still want to hear about that? Let's talk about it. I'm not actually going to be talking that long, so I think there'll actually be some time for questions. So let's see if we can get everything in hand here. And I'm going to move over where I can see the screen. So if you can hear me, let's start with the slideshow. This is actually a presentation I did last year. And so we can just go on to the two books that Jerry published this last one with me, the final analysis, but the one before that is much more detailed and much more colorful, with over 500 footnotes and zillions of color pictures in case you're interested in that. So at the autopsy, photographs were taken, and this is in the official collection. And this is supposedly where the fatal bullet came into JFK's head, from the back, of course. But there's a problem with this, isn't there? None of the pathologists saw this. What did I just say? None of the pathologists saw this. What's going on? So they showed this picture. Leave it up there if you would. Or did I make it disappear? So they showed this picture to 16 doctors in Parkland. You know how many of them remembered this? Nobody remembered this. So I went to the National Archives and I looked at this with a stereo viewer. It yields a 2D picture, not a 3D picture. Each of these photographs is a pair. Each photograph is a pair. So with a stereo viewer, you can see in 3 dimensions. I did this for every single pair in the National Archives, and every single pair yields a 3D image, but not this one. Not this one. What's going on here? Here's another mystery from the frontal X-ray. You can see that this is a bullet fragment, isn't it? 6.5 millimeters across. What was the size of the weapon attributed to Oswald? 6.5 millimeters. Oh, what a coincidence. So what did the pathologist do with this 6.5 millimeter cross section? Can we recover it? What did they do with that at the autopsy? Do you think you can see that at the National Archives? They didn't say anything about it, not one word. It's not in their report. Nobody remembers it. Dozens of people at the autopsy. Nobody remembers this. Why were they taking x-rays? Can you imagine why they'd want to take x-rays? The only reason to take an x-ray is to find bullet evidence. But there it is, it's clear as day. But they didn't see it. How could they miss it? So I was really curious about this. So one morning at breakfast, my 5-year-old was sitting on one side of the table and my 7-year-old on the other, and I showed them this picture in David Lifton's book. So I said to my 7-year-old, can you come over here and find the bullet? And he came over and he said, is that it? Well, my daughter, who's 5, across the table, hadn't seen what we were doing, so I asked her to come over and find the bullet. So she walks around and she looks at the picture, and then she looks at me and she says, well, what's it supposed to look like? Well, I said, it's kind of round, and she said, oh, there it is. This is what 3 professional pathologists could not see at the autopsy. This is what dozens of paraprofessionals at the autopsy have no recollection of. It's not in the National Archives. I've been there 9 times. It's not there. How could they lose this? This is actually what they saw. This is the picture they actually saw. Photoshop, that's my only option. This is really, I believe this is very, very close to what they actually saw. Just a little piece of metal at the back. This is fake. Added later, after the autopsy was over. So the official government investigations, of course, believe their eyes. They believe x-rays they see, they believe red spots they see. And so, we lost the image again. The official case for that shot from the rear is based on these 2 items, the red spot and the 6.5 millimeter object that no one saw at the autopsy. This is the official story. That's what did it. 2 invisible items made the official story. I'm not kidding you. This is the way it went. So the government experts misled us. The officials trusted the photographs. They ignored the pathologists. They said, you guys don't know what you're talking about. You're only there, but you're pretty incompetent. They were not told that there was no provenance for the photographs. That is, there was no chain of possession for the photographs. The House Select Committee found the camera that was used, and they said, it does not match the photographs. They ignored them. What would have happened if they had believed the truth? The whole thing would have gone up in smoke. They couldn't believe this. Another myth, they believed that x-rays could not be changed. They really did believe that. The problem, of course, that they had never actually worked in a darkroom, and they did not have the first idea how x-ray copying was done. On this lateral x-ray, go back. There is a very strange white spot that is very unreal. I have never seen anything like that in a real patient x-ray, and it is not present on JFK's x-ray before he died. This was added also. Hundreds of measurements I've made at the archives prove this. But here's the real killer. We know that the 3 skull x-rays are all copies. They're not originals. Nobody knows where the originals are. They're trashed somewhere. How do I know that this is a copy? Well, this image is not from JFK because it has never been made public. So I had to use a patient as a model. But on JFK's x-ray, there's this T-shaped inscription. I have no idea what it means. I think somebody probably put it on there just as a personal mark saying I was here, I did this. But here's what's important. What's important is what it looks like on the x-ray. To make this mark, you would scrape off the emulsion on the x-ray film. You could use your fingernail or a metal device of any sort and produce this easily. It's trivial. So if you do that, then you leave a mark on the film itself that shows that you traumatized the film. So I was wondering, what if you looked at this film at the National Archives? Could you see that it was traumatized? So I did that. I asked Steve Tilley to take the film out of its transparent plastic container so I could see the film directly. So Steve did that. He handled it with his white gloves. And I looked very closely at both sides of that film to see where the emulsion was disrupted. You know what? It's not disrupted. It's all as clean as a freshly prepared ice rink. There is no mechanical destruction anywhere. What does this mean? It can only mean one thing. This is a copy of an X-ray. A copy would show the original mark. It does. But a copy would not have any problems with the emulsion. The emulsion would all be there because it was a copy. Nobody messed with the copy. It was the original they messed with. So I know 100% certain that this is not an original X-ray. Who else has looked at this? One person has looked at this. Dr. Michael Chesser, interested in my work, went to the National Archives and confirmed that this is true. No one else has bothered to look. So in summary, this is actually what happened. And we'll spare you the details. You can read my book. But JFK was killed by 3 shots to the head. We know this one has to be genuine because there's a fine trail of metal fragments across the top of the X-ray. No one can deny that shot. That's literally there on the X-ray. You can't easily, why would you introduce that on purpose on the X-ray? You want to avoid that. You wouldn't want, you could, I've proven that you could, but you wouldn't want to. And the shot in the right temple, probably from the grassy knoll, resulted in the big blowout in the back of his head. That fits perfectly. And then, of course, even the official pathologist agreed that there was a shot back here. So 3 shots altogether. These people were not going to miss. JFK was dead as soon as he entered the plaza. The pathologists, of course, were caught in a strange situation. When they were interviewed later on about the red spot, which they denied, and about the 6-millimeter fragment that you saw on the X-ray, they denied that. They didn't see either one of those. But just before the Clark panel, this is in the mid-60s, they were given the opportunity to review all the material again, including the X-rays. And here's what they said in their report. Revealed no evidence of a bullet or a major portion of a bullet. You just saw it. What are they talking about? They didn't see that again when they had a second chance to see it? No, they lied. They didn't have any choice. They had to lie. It's in the official records. They didn't see it, even when they got a second chance to see it. So there it is. Still, that's what you see in the National Archives today. There it is. Where's that piece of metal in the archives? Doesn't exist. Just this fake picture, that's all there is. There was a wound in JFK's back, quite low down, at the third thoracic body. This is not the magic bullet that comes out the throat. Can you picture that bullet coming out the throat? Of course, it's crazy. Paul O'Connor's sketch is even worse. It looks more like the fourth thoracic vertebrae. And that's what Dr. Blakey called it, T4, JFK's doctor. Neither one fits with a magic bullet. This was such a setup at the autopsy, controlled by the military, that one of the persons who could have sorted this out that night was not given the opportunity. Paul O'Connor. Humes, he's the chief pathologist, he told Paul to go outside the room while he was guarded by a Marine in the hallway. He remained outside for approximately 30 to 40 minutes while the doctors inside could do their work, and so that Paul could not see it. Guarded by a Marine to make sure he didn't see. It's not advancing. Or was that the last one? Maybe it was. No, here we go. I'm not going to spend as much time on these, but Dr. Mike Chesser, a brilliant observer also, been to the National Archives to confirm basic elements of all of my work, found that the bone here was missing on JFK's skull x-ray. Not missing on this side, but it's missing here. Entirely consistent with this shot through the right temple. So we have more confirmation of the third shot. And this is probably a little too complex for us today, but it's in my book. And this shows the location of the piece of bone, the Harper fragment, that was kicked out the back of JFK's head and found in the plaza the next day. So the bone's kicked out of the back of the head. What does that mean? Obviously a shot from the front. So I did a little shop work. I got a real Mannlicher-Carcano bullet, cut off a little piece, and produced my own x-rays using a real human skull and a real Mannlicher-Carcano bullet. And you can see what it should look like. If this were a real cross-section of a bullet, it's pretty easy to see. And that's what it would look like from the front. If it were real, based on what we see in that fake image, the bullet should have looked this big on the lateral x-ray, on JFK's x-ray. But it's just a tiny sliver here. So we know it was a fake. There, that's JFK's x-ray. You see how small this is and how difficult it is to see? So that's how easy it should have been to see if it were real. Here's one of the official autopsy photographs. Notice the location of the telephone in the background. And also notice the tiles here. They're not all the same size, are they? That's a little strange. Here is a diagram drawn by Rydberg, who knows the autopsy suite well. He was the artist. And this is his memory of things. You see where he drew the telephone? Is that what you saw? Is that what you saw in the autopsy photograph? Take another look. You think maybe Rydberg was just a little drunk when he drew this, or maybe stoned? Or maybe that's not a real photograph. This is bizarre. Wow. And did you know that there was an intact bullet at the autopsy? A whole bullet? Of course, we don't have it today, but we know 6 people who saw it. 6 people who saw it. One of them was the chief of surgery who said, "I held that bullet in my hand." David Osborne later served as Deputy Surgeon General of the Navy and commander of the Bethesda National Naval Center. He was the top man. He saw the bullet. But the officials who interviewed him did not trust him. The officials did not trust an admiral of the Navy. They had too much to lose. One last story here. This is the official photograph of the back wound we've been talking about. I'm going to focus instead on this dark spot, which has no forensic relevance. Its photographic qualities are what I want to tell you about. I already told you that these autopsy photographs come in pairs. So I compared this photograph to its partner. It should look about the same, shouldn't it? It doesn't. Instead, where that black spot was, what we see instead is more of a gray spot with a black horizontal line drawn through it. Who at the autopsy would jump into the scene and draw that on JFK's back? Or is this more photo forgery? Of course it is. We know that at least this photograph is not authentic. It can't be. So we know that one photograph is not authentic. That opens the door to everything. Was that the last slide? Well, this is the last slide. Dr. Chesser was too insightful. So when he asked to go back one more time to look at things, you know what they told him? They basically said, "You already know too much." They didn't use those words, of course. But they refused to let him back in. And so when I asked again to try to confirm some of Chesser's other really trenchant observations, they said, "No, you've been there 9 times already. That's enough. Go home." So I did. Thank you for listening.
At this time, we'd like to take some questions. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
David, terrific presentation. Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan.
Do you have any comments to make about why General LeMay was at the autopsy at Bethesda Naval?
Yes.
He did not have any medical background. He was present.
Dr. LeMay suffered from Bell's palsy, which is pretty painful. So he almost always smoked a cigar. It helped him to clamp his jaw down and reduce the pain. So at the autopsy, of all things, Curtis LeMay was smoking his cigar. Can you believe that? So Dr. Humes, the chief pathologist, said, "Somebody tell that guy to put that damn thing out." So Paul O'Connor, who I cited here, had the job of walking over to the gallery and confronting General Curtis LeMay and asking him politely to put the cigar out. So what Curtis did was blew smoke into Paul's face and kept smoking. Did you want to know something more about Curtis?
Tell me more. I mean, I know sad things.
Well, Curtis and JFK were mortal enemies. You know that, yeah. LeMay hated JFK with a passion. He thought he was a coward for not dropping nuclear bombs on Cuba. And he was a coward for not sending in the troops at the Bay of Pigs. Yeah, so they really hated each other. You know, Curtis ran for vice president. You remember that? With the segregationists. Even though Curtis was a green guy, he would have liked some of AOL's proposals, and he was not a racist. I don't know what he was doing on that ticket. Any other comments about Curtis? Maybe you want to make some.
No, it's a sad reality that Curtis LeMay is an American hero.
He is.
Because
he firebombed
somehow
Tokyo,
he bombed
Japan. Yeah.
Japan and Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
It's a very sad contradiction.
He's also an Olympian, which most people don't remember.
Very good.
I have a comment to make that I think is relevant on World Honesty Day. Truth is very, very, sometimes very, very difficult thing to come to. And we've heard a lot of things today. To me, what makes the most importance is what is the evidence for it. Your evidence is very powerful, David. And that means a lot more than somebody just saying something and saying that, you know, they're right and nobody should question them.
Speaking was Dr. Greg Henkelman, a fellow radiation oncologist with 30 years or so of experience. Greg was my brightest medical student while I was at Loma Linda.
I have a question. Does any of your revelations from this deep analysis concern you for how the public will react to these new facts, new to us at least, in the public?
Well, you will have to wait to read my new book, which is coming out in, I hope, about 2 months. I finished writing it. The publisher is working his way through it and is far along. But we'll have even more damning first-day evidence of conspiracy, which I think might be more powerful than anything you see from these Trump releases. So, patience.
Thank you.
We have one more question.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Charles. I'm a local attorney here in New Orleans, and I definitely am somewhat of a conspiracy theorist, or what some may consider a conspiracy theorist. And so I'm wondering if what we've been presented today, and which is really compelling, is that we believe that, do we only believe that certain things are conspiracies, or certain things have been fabricated when it is rightful for our side, the side that we believe that we are on? Or, because here's a theory that I believe. I believe that there was some fabrication, there's been some fabrication done in regards to slavery and the African slave trade practices that were done. And if we can fabricate x-rays and we can fabricate election results, then most certainly has there been research or any documentation that shows, because I've seen some documentation as to that really America is stolen land, and that America, that the original natives of this land were black people, and that there was some fabrication of the Middle Slave Passage that happened, and where the numbers of Native Americans that were documented, that those numbers were then being switched to Africans that had come to this country. And so I want to know if these theories that we have are only suited to when it's something that is believed in the public, as is with the election results, or as in with, and I've listened to MLK tapes. I'm a podcast junkie, so I've listened to the MLK tapes, I've listened to the RFK tapes, I listened to the Alphabet Boys podcast where they talked about how the CIA and the FBI infiltrated all the Black Power movements during the 60s and put spies in them, and assassinated all our black leaders. And so I just want to know if only these theories are associated when it comes to white theories, white people that are of European descent, or does these theories also associate with the black experience here in America as well?
You know, the CIA also infiltrated the National Student Association, which was mostly white. So they're pretty colorblind. They'll treat anybody the way they want.
And do you think that history has been fabricated?
Yeah, I'm sure
in
they've done
regards
that
to
too.
the slavery and the slave practices here in America?
They do not know what the truth is. Read my book and read the final comments of James Angleton, and he focuses on the lying that he and his colleagues did throughout their careers, and he says he expects to see them all in hell.
Excellent observations. Thank you for raising them.
Yeah.
In terms of the evidence, these are not theories. We have evidence. We have evidence that William Sullivan, the number 2 person at the FBI, was in fact in charge of disseminating false information and sabotaging MLK. We have this. Another sad story about William Sullivan. He was fired by Hoover, and he had a very unfortunate accidental death in a hunting exercise. You see, this is one of my things. I call it cerebrogenocide, the elimination of intelligent people who speak up, and they are gone. Another example, just to give you, and this is from the FBI. CIA, we have William Colby testifying and telling us some very, very painful dirt that a poison arrow was used, right? The same faith. This time, poor guy, a good American, a good CIA person would say, drowned in Potomac. Drowned. Okay? So these are not theories. I hate the word conspiracy theories. These are not theories. We are here for the evidence, and that's the magnificent part of David's work, Jerry's work, and Jim's work. These are not theories. These are proven facts.
Ellen, can you believe that I have been called a conspiracy theorist after taking hundreds of experimental pieces of data at the National Archives on the X-rays, I'm a theorist? What an abuse of the English language. What an abuse of physics. I am a conspiracy experimentalist.
You know, I would like for Dr. Larian to also elaborate on his position, his job, what he actually worked with the FBI. Go ahead.
Good. I think we're done. Yes.
Once upon a time, I was the chief shrink, the chief psychiatrist for AMPERT, Mobile Psychiatric Emergency Response Team. So in fact, I love the FBI, but also it's always this conflict. I love it, but then things I discover and learn bothers me. It's too painful. And when you speak up, then you lose a lot. Like I lost my family, and I lost my friends. They are all, again, I'm going to come back to cerebral genocide. My attorney, Kevin Byers, Siobhan Reynolds, they died. I'm lucky to be alive. They died. Plane accident. And Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone, he died in a plane crash. There's a connection in all those things. And it's international, it's not an American problem. Around the world, when you speak the truth and you expose governmental dishonesty, bad things are going to happen to you and to your family and to your friends. And this is what we're facing. We should be aware of. And I love my wife, Judy. Thank you for being here. It's the only person I have now.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Yeah, let's give him a hand for that because he's speaking truth.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mantic. Excellent presentation, really very thought-provoking. It also reminds me of a meeting that Belinda and I had with the FBI years ago. When we were after we sent the coroner to prison, we wanted to meet with him to figure out what else we could do for corruption. And one of the agents looks at me and goes, "We're not interested in conspiracy theories." And I looked at him, I told him, I said, "Let me tell you something. We're going to document your conspiracy," which goes right back to what Eric had said. This is actual proof, and it needs to get out there. And we turned over 25,000 pages of documents to the FBI in our quest, for justice, of which I'm generally voting Republican. Of the 29 people we sent to prison, 27 of them are Republicans. So it really has nothing to do with what's behind your name. It's about doing the right thing. And I'm seeing a lot of that here, and I really appreciate the work that y'all are doing. Our next speaker is Dr. Jim Fetzer.
Well, we want to give you a hand for that, Terry.
Our next speaker is Dr. Jim Fetzer. Dr. Fetzer is a philosopher, scientist, former Devil Dog officer in the Marine Corps. He's published widely on the theoretical foundations of scientific knowledge, computer science, artificial intelligence, and evolution. He was a McKnight Professor Emeritus at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and he wrote the single exclusively scientific book on the JFK assassination science. So with that, Dr. Fetzer, I'll turn the mic over to you. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much. David and I began collaborating in 1992. He was the most important contributor to my first two collections of expert studies, Assassination Science 1998 and Murder in Dealey Plaza 2000, for which he suggested the name. He was also the inspiration for the third, The Great Zapruder Film Hoax, published in 2003, where Vincent Bugliosi, in his 1,500-page tomb attempting to resurrect the Warren Report, entitled Reclaiming History, said mine were the only exclusively scientific books ever published on the assassination. Unfortunately, he paid no attention to the content. David is the leading expert on the medical evidence in the world. And because it requires a certain degree of technical competence to follow his work in detail, I'm going to provide a simpler version of the science and expand upon the politics of the death of JFK. So we can begin with the first slide. We all know, of course, that the official account has Lee Oswald firing 3 shots from the 6th floor and being the lone gunman killing the president. All of that is mythical. There was no lone gunman. Lee Oswald didn't fire any shots, and there were many more than 6, none of which were fired from the 6th floor. Here we had Oliver Stone positing 3 shooting teams, which was a step in the right direction. Turns out that Malcolm Kilduff, acting press secretary, when he announced the death of the president, said it was a simple matter of a bullet right through the head. Well, if it was a simple matter of a bullet right through the head, how can there have been only 3 shots from behind? And indeed, if you went back and watched See It Now, say on NBC, they're reporting in detail that afternoon 2 shots. One was a small, clean puncture wound to the throat, which Malcolm Perry, MD, had described 3 times that afternoon as a wound of entry, where he knew it up close and personal, having performed a simple tracheostomy incision through the wound itself. And that shot to the right temple, which blew out the back of his head, which was attributed to Admiral George Berkeley, who is the chief of neurology at Parkland Hospital. Now, it turns out that by that evening, the Secret Service and the FBI had agreed there had been 3 shots, only 3. One had hit Jack about 5.5 inches below the collar, just to the right of the spinal column. The second had hit John Connolly in the back. And the third had hit Jack in the back of the head, killing him. Now, if you took those shot to the throat, the shot to the right temple, the shot to the back, and the shot to the throat, you got 4 of 5 hits on JFK. But they were all fired from different directions by different shooters. So if you just look at the number of shots fired, just the hits on JFK, you've already got 4, and then you got the shot to Connolly, that's 5. I seem to recall that 5 is a number larger than 1. So you begin to appreciate the enormity. And the fact is that the public was being informed at the time of 2 shots, both of which had been fired from in front. So that when the story starts to dribble in about 3 shots fired from above and beyond that the Secret Service and the FBI agree upon, Frank McGee, who is nobody's fool, says, this is incongruous. How can a man have been shot from in front, from behind? And that was a conundrum with which the Warren Commission had to deal. And I believe much of the public skepticism that met its release of the Warren Report a year later was because so many had watched, engrossed on television, reports like by Chet Huckley and Frank McGee and others on other networks describing those 2 wounds, both of which fired from in front, that somehow had disappeared. So we can, here's a piece I wrote for Oon's review on David and Jerry's book, How New Book Nails How JFK was taken out in Dealey Plaza, adding a 5th hit to the president to the side of the head. Now again, each of these shots was fired by a different shooter in a different location. So what in the world was going on here? This is Framing the Patsy, yeah. Lee. How did Lee become the lone demented gunman? Well, it's pretty fascinating because he was actually captured in the most famous photograph taken in Dealey Plaza by EP photographer James Ike Alchin, where you see the limousine in the foreground. If you look where JFK's left ear would be, if his left ear were visible, you can see a small white spiral nebula with a dark hole in the center where the bullet that hit him in the throat passed through the windshield en route to its target. In the back area, and we'll proceed to look at it more closely, there's a figure hanging out who many have thought bore a striking resemblance to the alleged assassin. You look further in the background, and there's an open window to a broom closet of a uranium mining company that turns out to be a CIA asset in the Dow Tax that's bracketed by the fire escape from which 3 shots were fired. The only unsilenced shots fired by a Mannlicher Carcano. And you notice LBJ's security term is already reacting even while Jax is looking around as though I have no idea what's going on. Here you look more closely at that area and you can see the figure. He's known as a doorman. We look even more closely there and you'll notice a number of anomalies that are fairly astonishing. Notice in particular, he has no left shoulder. How can that be? We all have left shoulders. There's a man called Black Tie Man who's both in front of him and behind him at the same time, an obvious optical impossibility, meaning this photograph has to have been altered. There's also a figure in the foreground with his hands up to protect his eyes from the sun, whose face has been blacked out. He's called Black Hole Man. His whole shirt has been obliterated. And rather oddly, there's a figure of a black man lower down on the doorman's shirt, which is long-sleeved, richly textured, and tattered for no apparent reason whatsoever. Indeed, it turns out that the Dallas police were so aware that it was Lee Oswald in the doorway that they had him take off his outer shirt, which he'd brought back from Russia. Marina remembers, by the way, having laundered it in order to make it less apparent that they were the same figure. Now, as Ralph Sinkay has observed, where Ralph is a chiropractor and help people get in shape so their clothes fit better, we actually know this was Lee Oswald because he's the same height, the same weight, the same build, the same shirt, the same T-shirt as the man in the doorway. But the fact is, we know more now because Larry Rivera has done a superposition. A superposition where if you take 2 images and place them from this, where the eyes, the pupils of the eyes are equidistant, then if it's the same person, all the features will fall into place. He's done it. We've got the verification. Without any doubt, it was Lee in the doorway. In fact, Harold Weisberg already recognized this in his second whitewash, photographic whitewash back in 1966, reporting that the Warren Commission staff had a problem here trying to conceal that Lee was in the doorway at the time of the shooting and therefore cannot not only have been the lone demented gunman, but cannot have been one of the multiple shooters in Dealey Plaza. And by the way, the Warren Commission insisted it was Billy Lovelady, a co-worker who was the doorman. Billy was present there, but when you do the superposition, his features do not match. Here you have, again, Lee now turning, doorman turning into Lee Oswald. And here it turns out the man with his hands raised to protect his eyes was Billy Lovelady. And the reason they obscured the shirt is because he was wearing a short sleeve, red and white, vertically striped shirt that bore no resemblance to the dark, richly textured shirt on the man in the doorway. So he claimed because Billy Lovelady was also in that area that he was the man in the doorway. Here we have, Larry, who has done this brilliant work, has done a reconstruction to what it would have looked like had it been authentic and in color. We would have noticed the differences, would have been so striking. So we know Lee didn't do it. Then what do we have? Yeah, okay. Those who knew Lyndon the best became convinced that he had been involved in the assassination. None knew him better than Madeline Duncan Brown, with whom he began an affair in 1948. She bore him a son, Stephen, in 1950. Because of their relationship, she was frequently invited to social events. And in this case, the evening before the assassination, she was invited to the home of Clint Murkison Sr., one of the most wealthy Texas oil men, for a special event she thought was in honor of J. Edgar Hoover, who would typically stop in Dallas on his way to California to the racetrack, where when he put down a bet, his horse invariably won. Turns out the track was owned by Clint Murkison Sr., so it was no coincidence. But also present there were H.L. Hunt, Richard Nixon, and Lyndon showed up late, unexpectedly. And these heavy hitters disappeared into a boardroom for 15 or 20 minutes. When they broke up, Lyndon strode toward her, and she told me that she expected he was going to whisper sweet nothings in her ear, and instead he told her in a hateful tone of voice that after tomorrow, he wasn't going to have to put up with embarrassment from those Kennedy boys any longer. That's not a threat, that's a promise. He actually called her and reiterated that same claim the following morning. Well, 6 weeks later, they had a rendezvous at the Driscoll Hotel, where Madeline confronted him with rumors rampant in Dallas at the time that he'd been involved, since no one stood to gain more personally. And he blew up at her and told her the CIA and the oil boys had decided that Jack had to be taken out. That's, I think, as close as we come to a direct confession. Others who have drawn the same conclusion included Billy Saul Estes. Billy Saul had conversations with Cliff Carter, who was Lyndon's chief administrative aide, and Mac Wallace, who was Lyndon's personal hitman. Mac killed 12 people for Lyndon, including one of his own sisters. And Billy said he got this sense from talking with them that they had been involved. We had Bar McClellan, who was working for this Ed Clark, a powerful attorney where a lot of the planning for the assassination took place, and I dare say of the cover-up and legal aspects. Moreover, Roger Stone has published a book against the man who killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. There are others I'll mention. E. Howard Hunt, on the verge of his death, he thought he was dying, told his son, St. John, that the chain of command had gone from Lyndon Johnson to Cord Meyer to David Lee Phillips to William Harvey to David Sanchez Morales. And that appears to be correct. Now, Hunt said he was there in Dallas at the time, but he was on the back bench. He did not participate in the shooting, and he was not the third of the tramps, so often mistakenly thought to be. When you put the pieces together, you get further conclusions done about exactly how this all played out. We not only have, here we have George Herbert Walker Bush, who was in front of the book depository. This photograph occurred in Jesse Curry's JFK assassination files, a paperback only put out by 7-Eleven stores, where he went to work after he retired as chief of police in Dallas, and I may have been the first to recognize that was George H.W. Bush. On the corner of Houston and Maine, there was a group of CIA officials who were there to pay their last respects. I mean, what more powerful indication could we have of CIA complicity? Here are the three tramps. They were, in fact, Charles Rogers, also known as Richard Montoya, Charles Harrelson, the father of Woody Harrelson, and the third, Chauncey Marvin Holt, who I actually met and discussed the case. They were there but did not fire shots. They were directed to go to a boxcar in the railroad yard behind the parking lot, which was used by the Dallas police. It would look to be locked, but would actually be open. When they climbed in, they found it was loaded with explosive weapons, ammunition. They thought they were going to get away, but the railway conductor called the train back and had the police arrest them, and that's when they were marched through Dealey Plaza. Lots of anomalies here. The man on the right walking past him is Edward Lansdale. He was an Air Force general responsible for assassinations around the world. He was identified by E. Fletcher Prouty, who was a subordinate, and Victor Krulak, one of the most celebrated of all Marine Corps generals. He had a distinctive gait and a funny hand and ring and so forth, so it was undoubtedly Lansdale. And here you have Lansdale waiting to meet with George Herbert Walker Bush, who actually, during the assassination, was in that second floor broom closet for the uranium mining op. That was a CIA operation supervising an anti-Castro Cuban who was firing the 3 shots with a Mannlicher Carcano to set up the acoustical impression of only 3 shots having been fired. Now, lots of times it's claimed that if this had been a large-scale assassination, someone had talked, but nobody talked. Well, lots of people have talked. This is from a single page of Noel Twyman's book, Bloody Treason, where he goes through how Sam Giancana talked, Trafficante talked, you know, you got this right-winger, Miltier talked. Then there were other people who were the, you know, claimed to be communication quarter. Chauncey himself talked. He gave interviews, a radio interview and all that. I mean, plenty of people actually were talking. Here you have now, when you go through the medical evidence for which David has made such monumental contributions, you have to ask yourself, considering that it included altering x-rays under control of medical officers of the U.S. Navy and the Secret Service, could the mafia have extended its reach into Bethesda to alter those x-rays? Or, since it was a substitution of another brain for the brain of JFK, could anti-Castro Cubans have made a substitution of another brain? Or when it comes to the alteration of the film, and the Zapruder film, it turns out it's been massively edited. They know he blacked out the blowout at the back of the head, but they took out a limo stop, and here Larry Rivera has done extraordinarily important work in his book, The JFK Horseman, where he transcribed tapes that had done with 4 motorcycle escort officers and their supervisor, Stavros Ellis, that had been recorded by Fred Newcomb back in 1971, all 4 of whom confirmed the limo stop that occurred here, because after Jack had been hit in the back and hit in the throat, he appeared to be still alive. Now, Bob Livingston believes that, in fact, the shot to the throat fragmented part went down into the right lung and the other upward to sever the tough membrane that covers the cerebellum, known as the tentorium. Now, you have to understand, Bob Livingston was a world authority on the human brain and an expert on wound ballistics. And I believe that Bob Livingston has it right, which is why JFK seems so utterly unresponsive after having been shot in the throat. It created damage that was not externally visible except for the absence of any affect. He also was wearing this very tough corset that made it virtually impossible for him to move, so that when he was hit in the back of the head, after the limo stopped, he slumped forward. Jack eased him back up, was looking him right in the face when he was hit in the right temple. By the second, that actually was the one that did the particle distribution David described. And near simultaneous, the side of the head, which I believe was fired from the inside of the sewer opening there at the curbside. And that those, of course, were the final shots that kill him. But I suspect he may have already been dead if the bullet that fragmented did the right kind of damage to the brain, as I think Bob would be inclined to suppose. But the point is, when you consider that it was a Secret Service that had control of the film, you get Josiah Thompson arguing the film can't have been edited because it was only in control of the Secret Service, but that ignores the fact the Secret Service was complicit in setting him up for the hit. When Nigel Turner did The Men Who Killed Kennedy, the 7th episode called The Smoking Gun, he interviewed David and me and others of my collaborators, and he asked me to enumerate 15 indications of Secret Service complicity in setting him up for the hit, which included putting the limousines in the wrong sequence. So you had the presidential limousine out front to make it easier to locate by the shooters when he should have been in the middle. I mean, you'd normally have the lower ranking, the mayor, then the vice president. I mean, after all, they came to see Jack and Jackie. So once they've seen Jack and Jackie, why would they hang around for the mayor or the vice president? I mean, it's ridiculous. They left 2 agents who would have been on the limo behind at Love Field. They didn't weld the manhole covers. They let the crowd spill out into the street. They didn't cover the open windows. They changed the motorcade route just a few days before, where John Connolly, I believe, was instrumental on the 18th of November in changing the motorcade route. I mean, the list goes on and on. They collected the x-rays before they'd been developed, and the photographs, and the next time we see them or eventually gain access, they don't resemble what you have eyewitnesses reporting having taken place. So it's pretty obvious you're reduced in the number of potential responsible parties for the assassination in terms of those who could have controlled the cover-up. And if we get, here's an absolutely sensational book by Phil Nelson, LBJ Mastermind of the JFK Assassination. If you just read a couple of chapters about Lyndon's upbringing and so forth, you discover he was a very complicated but very ruthless and narcissistic individual who had an uncanny ability to size up men in terms of their strengths and weaknesses almost instantaneously. Madeline and I in Dallas having lunch together, she said to me how John Connolly said it was impossible to describe Lyndon because it would take every adjective in the dictionary. And I said, well, Madeline, what he meant was Lyndon had so many strengths for good, but also so many for evil, that for every good, positive attribute, you had a corresponding negative one, which, of course, was the case. This guy was a fascinating, by far the single most interesting, though in a diabolical fashion, president we've ever had in office. Here we have a conversation, if we can get it to play. This is a conversation between Billy Saul and Cliff Carter. And I think it's probably not going to play, but you can find it online because it created a sensation. It's about 2.5 minutes. And they're agreeing about how they were loyal to Lyndon, but that Lyndon had hired Mac Wallace to kill JFK. Now, Mac actually wasn't shooting at JFK. Mac was actually shooting at John Connolly in the mistaken belief it was Ralph Yarborough, who was a liberal Texas senator that Lyndon despised. They had a huge argument that morning because LBJ wanted to get his very close friend, I mean, he'd been his campaign manager, John Connolly, out and Yarborough in. But Jack overrode him on the ground that the chief executive of the state should ride with the chief executive of the United States, and it was too late to get the word out. What actually had the political benefit, the benefit of obfuscating the politics, because no one would have thought that Lyndon would ever put his close friend, John Connolly, into such a position of danger. So here you see a diagram. We had, just to describe some of those shots, the first was to the back, was from the top of the county records building. That was by a deputy sheriff. representing the Texas oil men. The second shot, that shot to the throat that passed through the windshield, was fired from inside the triple underpass by an Air Force expert who was using a rifle, a new rifle, special collapsible rifle manufactured by Remington in a small number by Curtis LeMay, so that he could be assured he was doing what he was doing at the behest of the government of the United States. We had a CIA guy there on the grassy knoll who was joined the Dallas Police Force. He was using a handgun, and he had what you might have thought was the easiest shot, but Jackie would have been injured, so he had to pull his shot. The bullet wound up in the grass, where it was picked up by Dallas Lieutenant Day and never seen again. And you had the shot to the right temple fired from the triple intersection, the intersection of the triple underpass and the picket fence by the mafia hitman. And you had, I believe, the shot fired to the side of the head from inside, what I take to be inside the curbside, was by the Israeli hitman. In fact, it was when I started to identify who these shooters were that it became apparent to me that that was the overall plan, that we were talking about a situation where, let me see if I can go back to, we slipped past one very important slide. There it is. The best way to understand the assassination is to distinguish between the sponsors, the individuals and groups who wanted him replaced by Lyndon Johnson, primarily for policy reasons, except for the anti-Castro Cubans who wanted revenge for the Bay of Pigs, where they falsely believed JFK had betrayed them, a belief that the CIA encouraged. In fact, the Soviets had learned of the invasion. They'd shared with Castro when we were coming, and they knew it themselves. The only party who did not know was the commander-in-chief, who would have called it off under those circumstances. So he set him up. Jack was threatening to shatter the agency into 1,000 pieces. Obviously, that wasn't something they were going to accept. The Joint Chiefs were disillusioned with Jack because he'd not invaded Cuba, contrary to the unanimous recommendation. He'd signed an above-ground test ban treaty with the Soviets against their unanimous opposition. And now he was pulling our forces out of Vietnam at the end of 1964. He was pulling them out. And McGeorge Bundy was indeed involved in duplicity here, and Lyndon had basically signed a revision of the order pulling the troops out before Jack was even dead. I mean, it was that bad. And then, of course, we had the Texas oilman. He was threatening to cut the oil depletion allowance. We had the mafia was upset because they thought they had an agreement with Joe. They may have had an agreement with Joe not to crack down if they made sure that Chicago went for Jack in Illinois. Chicago, of course, did go for Jack in Illinois. And they may have felt they were double-crossed by Bobby as Attorney General, bringing so many suits and indictments. Edgar himself, just as he had sex dossiers on Congress, the mafia had a sex dossier on Edgar that inhibited him from even talking about the existence of organized crime until post the Valachi hearings, when it was no longer politically possible to deny. And, of course, the Eastern establishment surrounding the Fed. Jack had instructed the Department of the Treasury to print United States notes in the belief that it was absurd for the government to pay interest to a private consortium of banks to publish the currency of the United States when the United States could do it by the Department of Treasury for free. Israel, he was at loggerheads with David Ben-Gurion, who wanted Israel to develop nuclear weapons. Jack feared it was going to set off a nuclear arms race, so he was opposed to that. Each of these individuals and groups had their own shooter in Dallas that day. And George Herbert Walker Bush and Edward Lansdale appear to have been the coordinators, where Lansdale appears to have positioned the shooters and determined the sequence of shots, but where it was all facilitated of the assassination by Lyndon Johnson and of the cover-up by Edgar Hoover. And I just take you back to the origins of the assassination, which were in Los Angeles in 1960 when Jack beat Lyndon for the nomination of the Democratic Party. Well, I'd like to show you that last image of Jack and Lyndon together. What happened is Jack invited Stuart Symington to be his running mate, but he gave him overnight to think about it. Bobby went by the Johnson suite to extend a pro forma symbolic invitation to run with Jack. That was a long-standing tradition. He was just dumbfounded when Lyndon jumped on it and, using information provided by Hoover, threatened to expose that Jack had Addison's disease, wasn't expected to live a long, healthy life, that among his dalliances was one with a beautiful woman who turned out to be a spy for East Germany. And moreover, that if he were not on the ticket, then any legislative proposal sent down by the White House would be dead on arrival, because in his position as a powerful majority leader, he'd bottle him up. Jack and Bobby tried to figure a way out, but Lyndon had him boxed in, and they had to accede to his demand. One of Lyndon's wealthy backers, learning this was happening, burst into the Johnson suite cursing and swearing, because now LBJ was going to help JFK become president of the United States. Bobby Baker took him into a bedroom and explained what they had in mind. He came out all smiles, saying he thought that was an excellent plan. Bobby Baker would subsequently declare that JFK would not live out his first term and would die a violent death. And Lyndon Johnson would send Cliff Carter, his chief administrative aide, down to Dallas to make sure all the arrangements were in place for the assassination. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very enlightening discussion. At this point, we'd like to take a few questions.
Hey, my name is Aquanetta Barnes. Now, I'm fighting for a lot of patents and ideas, so I know what you say about they kill leaders that was doing purging off. Well, I am she, that is on that and her. They got Tushy, Whitey, they know along our she, nor have I ever been recognized. A lot of ideas are put into motion, warning signals, the way to put out fires and all that. But my curious thing is a lot, what you say is a lot to take in. Now, when Kennedy passed, I'm 72 years old. When Kennedy passed here, because he passed here, and he went down St. Charles Street, he was in a limousine motorcade. You couldn't even see them. They were going so fast. I'm like, everybody said, here comes Kennedy. Well, who is it? I just seen red hair. I didn't see nothing. But they say Leo Harvey Oswald and the Marcellus, too, the crime boss, they thought he was going to, I guess, get shot here. I didn't understand why he went to Dallas, and then they had the top drop. You know what I mean? You had the top drop, and why more than him didn't get shot. Now, one lady say they had somebody in the bushes that they believe more than Leo Harvey Oswald. They had someone in the bushes that they think shot too, but they never interviewed her no more. So my curiosity, why they had the top down when he came here to New Orleans, they flew down here, and he was in limousine motorcade. So how he get to Dallas, Texas? And that's the conspiracy that worked. But they said Lyndon B. Johnson was sweet on Jackie Kennedy, but was mad also with him because the way he was treating Jackie. They think he had something to do with it. You had all these different theories about why he may have gotten shot. But that's a lot to take in. Have you ever considered why, when he was in New Orleans, he was in a limousine motorcade, but he gets to Dallas, and they give him a top-down, what was Corvette. So all that conspiracy was to do it in Dallas because they thought Lee Harvey Oswald or Marcellus was going to do it here in New Orleans.
Well, to the extent that I understood the question, Lee appears to have been recruited by the Office of Naval Intelligence when he was undergoing recruit training in San Diego. I myself served as a series commander with 15 DIs and 300 recruits under my command. They called him Oswaldovich because of his interest in Russian. He was not a very good shot. He was mediocre, and in 1 year when he ought to have been qualifying with a rifle, he did not, which meant he had to be on a special assignment, I suspect, studying Russian in Monterey. He was subsequently stationed at Atsugi, which is our most secure base worldwide. Anyone thought to be a traitor to the United States would most certainly not have been there. Whereas a radar operator, he knew the altitude at which the U-2 overflights were spying on the Soviet Union. They knew it was taking place, but they didn't know the altitude and couldn't shoot him down. Oswald made a pseudo-defection to the Soviet Union, renouncing his citizenship on a Sunday when the embassy wasn't even open, so it had no legal significance, and appears to have provided that information. Now, Fletcher Prouty has reported that the U-2 was also shorted in its fuel, so it looked as though it had a full fuel supply, but in fact it did not. And when Khrushchev declared that the U.S. was spying on Russia, Eisenhower retaliated by denying it, and then Khrushchev was able to bring in parts of the U-2 and Francis Gary Powers, who had not taken his cyanide tablet. He did, of course, as was mentioned in passing, marry the niece of a KGB colonel, fetching Marina, back to the United States. They were not treated as traitors. He was giving money to relocate. She went to Dallas to live with Ruth Payne, who, with her husband, were CIA assets. Lee went to New Orleans here to be sheep-dipped as a pro-communist, Castro sympathizer. We had an event on the street where there was a rowdy crowd and there was a TV camera just happened to be there. There are lots and lots of details here, some rather fascinating stuff, including his romance with Judith Very Baker, and they're working on a fast-acting cancer that was supposed to be used against Fidel. This is in coordination with David Ferry, Lee Oswald, Judith Very, and under Dr. Mary Sherman, which appears to have been actually used to take out Jack Ruby. Then Lee goes to Dallas and gets a position in the book depository just weeks before. They changed the motorcade route to bringing into the, not just Jack into the kill zone, but in front of the, purported, the patsy. Everything Lee ever told us about his case has turned out to be true. Will Fritz, the homicide detective, he was shown backyard photographs, and he said, that's not me, but that's somebody else's body with my face pasted on. Larry Rivera's done brilliant work. It was that CIA guy who in the police uniform who had to pull his shot, who was the body double in New Orleans. It goes on and on. So there's really not room for a lot of debate about most of these issues, and I certainly agree. We're not talking here about conspiracy theories. We're talking about conspiracy facts. In fact, indeed, conspiracy is the most widely prosecuted crime in the United States. So that conspiracy turned out to be as American as apple pie. Other questions?
Yes. If I understood you correctly, you said that Matt Wallace shot shot Connolly.
Yeah.
And that LBJ wanted Connolly shot?
No. He didn't want Connolly shot.
Did not.
Did you not hear where I said he had a big argument with JFK that morning?
Right.
Because he wanted Connolly out in Yarborough Inn, and Jack overrode him on the ground that the chief of the state should ride with the chief of the United States.
Okay.
Yeah. No, he didn't want him in, but it turned out to have political benefits because no one would have ever thought he would put Connolly at risk.
Okay, well, that's why I was asking, because it
Yeah, and
didn't make
therefore
sense to
they
me.
intended to exonerate Lyndon when he was the bad guy. I think there may have been an image here, too, from Noel Twyman's completely sensational book, Bloody Treason, where he explained that the ideal conspiracy, and this was already published in 1997, would bring together the Secret Service with the CIA, Mafia with the Joint Chiefs, and Lyndon and Edgar. Well, Lyndon and Edgar already hated, and in fact, it was Lyndon who was the brains behind the assassination and in the position to bring them all together, but that didn't mean meeting jointly in the same place by representatives thereof, simply covertly working it all out. This was years in the making. Other questions? Yes.
By November of 1963, I imagine that the CIA was aware of 50,000 ways to kill a man that would have been cleaner than this. So why wouldn't they go with
Brian,
the more
I couldn't quite hear you. Pull your mic down just a little. Say it again.
testing? By November of 1963,
yes.
I imagine the CIA was aware of at least 10,000 ways to kill a man that would have been cleaner and left less evidence. So why select such a public approach?
Yeah, it's such a great question. They did it because if it had not been done in public in front of hundreds of witnesses, no one would have believed that it wasn't a conspiracy. So the whole idea was a rationale. They had to do it in public. It had to be a situation where they were in control or could manage the evidence. They anticipated stealing the body, altering the evidence as David is so magisterially exposed. They knew what they could do, and they had surveillance. All the civilians were under surveillance. Mary Mormon and Jean Hill, for example. Mary was taking Polaroids, giving them to Jean. She was coating them with a preservative. They were immediately apprehended after the assassination. They took the photographs away. They knew how many photographs she'd taken. They'd asked Jean, and they were interrogated separately, how many shots she had. And she said, well, at least maybe 4 or 5. And they said, no, that's not possible. There were only 3. This was in the immediate aftermath of the shooting because they knew they had to control the narrative. David, yes. Where's the mic? Yeah.
So good points, Jim. So yeah, the federal people picked up all the photographs. So, and I think you and I agree that the CIA knew this was going to be one of their biggest hits.
Yes.
So why didn't the CIA photograph this?
Why didn't the CIA?
Why didn't the CIA photograph this?
They did photograph it.
Where did they photograph it?
Well, there appeared to have been more than one camera. You got Zapruder standing up on the pedestal. I climbed up there myself. But his secretary seems to interfere. I mean, this is on the very cover of the book, The Great Zapruder Film Hoax. Jack White pointed out, and it looks as though she was obscuring Zapruder's view. Mind you, too, Zapruder said he began filming when the motorcade come up Houston before it turned on him. So we got that big gap in missing frames because Greer mistook the frontage road in front of the book depository for Elm Street, swung out too widely, nearly hit a concrete abutment. Roy Truly explained he nearly hit this thing and had to pause and then get back in line. Now, when we see the car disappearing, right, at the bottom, that's very, very odd. If this was with a handheld camera, that would not occur because you'd keep the limousine in focus in the center of your view, but it's consistent with a camera on a tripod in the parabola area, the pergola area filming, and then you got the film slightly disappearing. And so they had that footage. They used original footage. As you well know, John Costello has done brilliant work of internal proof of the alteration of the film, where it's 98% completely accurate, but the other 2% gives it away. For example, the Stemmons freeway sign had a bullet hole in it, and that was too many. In fact, when they discovered one of the shots had missed and injured the distant bystander, James Tagg, that's when they had to account for all the wounds with only 2 bullets, which they did by changing the description of the back wound to the base of the back of the neck, claiming it transited the neck without hitting any bony structures and exited the throat. So now the throat entrance wound now becomes an exit wound. The separate back wound now turns out to be a base of the back of the neck, claiming it went into Connolly, shattered a rib, came out, hit his right wrist, and wound up in his left thigh. Now, there were, by my count, 10 to 12 shots fired, depending on how many were actually fired at Connolly, and the mistaken belief it was Ralph Yarborough. At the very least, we have the chest shot, but it's possible Mac Wallace fired additional shots, at least one that hit the wrist and wound up in the thigh. But they did photograph it. I have 6 parties, including mutual associates of ours, David, who actually have seen the film. Rich De La Rosa explained he had seen it 3 different times, and I even included a De La Rosa report as one of the appendices of the great Zapruder film hoax. Monk, Greg Burnham, claims to have seen it 3 different times. William Raymond claims to have seen it, and 3 others. I know 6 people who saw what they call the other film, but which appears to be the unedited film, which include the limousine stop and all that. And it was very abrupt. Everyone was jostled forward. And as I say, Jack had very limited mobility because of his corset. So the original was taken to the National Photographic Interpretation Center on Saturday. It was the camera uses a 16 millimeter film, and it shoots down one side, and then you'd have to take it up, flip it over, shoot down the other side to get 8 millimeter strips. And if you want to run the whole thing, you'd have to take it apart, split it, and splice it. They got at the National Photographic Interpretation Center on Saturday an 8 millimeter all-ray split film developed in Dallas. It appears to have been the original. And a briefing board was prepared for the multiplicity of shots that actually occurred. Sunday, then, a replacement was brought down from Rochester, where the CIA has a secret films location lab. David Lifton was the first to identify Hawkeye Works as a 16 millimeter unsplit film that had all the alterations taking place, eliminated the limo stop and all that. Let me tell you something truly astonishing. In his latest work on the limo stop, Larry has discovered that during the stop, several things happened. Bobby Hargis, riding to the left rear, who when Jack's debris hit him, it was so hard he thought he himself had been shot, parked his bike, ran between the 2 vehicles, which would have been impossible had they been in motion. Douglas Jackson, on the other side, motored his bike up the grassy knoll until it fell over and then proceeded on foot. They both believe shots had been fired from that vicinity. 5 agents got out and surrounded the Kennedy limousine. 1 took a chunk of skull and threw it back in the car, which I believe would be the Harper fragment that they later brought back and put it at a different location to obfuscate where the shooting had actually taken place. But get this, one of the agents actually climbed into the limousine, an agent by the name of Glenn Bennett. And notice that's not the same name as Clint Hill. We're not talking about Clint, who claimed he rushed up, to protect Jackie. I believe Clint was actually hanging on the back of the limo all the way to Parkland, and they had to alter various films in order to obscure that fact, and that Glenn Bennett was inside. There's actually there's a second limo stop at the entry to the Stemmons Freeway, so they wanted to verify that Jack was actually dead, D-E-A-D, and of course, he was. But there was so much going on in terms of photographic alteration, chicanery. It's really astounding. This was very thoroughly mapped out. And by the way, I don't believe for a minute that Alan Dulles was a principal. Alan Dulles was going to be important because Lyndon would put him on the Warren Commission, and Alan Dulles had to know how the whole thing had been developed so he could mislead the other commissioners by role of his authority, where he started out by sharing a book that says all American assassins are lone gunmen. I mean, it was that bad. We have this book by David Talbot, the Devil's Chessboard, that is laying the blame on Dulles. There's an astounding resistance to recognizing that it was all the way with LBJ, but I guarantee that was the way it played out.
I'd like to follow up on my question if I could.
Yeah.
Jim, you have not answered my question.
Go ahead. Which question did I
for
not
5
answer?
minutes, there was still no answer.
What was the question?
Let's begin again.
Oh, David.
Yes.
What did I not answer?
Where
how many?
exactly was the CIA photographer? We know it was not Zapruder. Where was the CIA photographer?
No, I said, Dave, it was a camera on a tripod in the pergola. And that's why the limousine disappears, because the pergola is not following the limousine. And you got the camera disappearing, which would never have happened if it were a handheld cameraman holding it, because he would have focused on the limo.
But Jim, the federal agencies collected all the films from that day, and they identified all the photographers.
For 2 weeks after the assassination, They had agents stationed at all the photo labs around
Yes,
Dallas.
they were all
and they take
collected.
any photograph or film. This is in Pictures of the Pain, Richard Task. He's even got a photograph of the card they left saying, we have taken your photograph as evidence. And, you know, most of it was never returned. But, I mean, they did quite a job of vacuuming up evidence, David.
Yeah,
you
but
know.
they forgot to pick up the CIA photographer film. Why is that?
What do you mean the CIA? What film do you mean, David?
You just said that the CIA photographer was there in the pergola on a tripod.
No, I said there was a camera on a tripod.
Why didn't they pick up that film?
That was used to film it.
Why
But,
didn't they
you know,
pick up that
I mean,
film?
they took the footage to the Kodak lab right there in Dallas. And
No,
it was,
you're
I mean, it was
confusing
that-
two things, Jim. You're confusing Zapruder with a CIA photographer. Please stop doing that.
Oh, okay. You want me to distinguish the Zapruder from what you're calling the CIA, which I'm suggesting
I'm only
was
focused
actually
on the CIA
a camera on
photographer.
a
Forget
tripod.
Zapruder. We know that
well, give
story.
me your answer, David. My goodness. I mean, you know, I'm recognizing your role here in all of this research, which has been
But where is the CIA
so
photographer
important.
and all the photographs that were taken that day?
Well, there were lots of photographs. I mean, we got scads of them, you know.
You're
And
not
we have
answering my
another,
question, and the
another
reason
home
is-
movie taken by Nix.
May I
from
tell
the
you why you
opposite
cannot
side.
answer my question?
David,
Yeah,
I'm
go
not-
right ahead,
Tell
David.
me your answer to your question so I get a better sense of what you think you're talking about.
Yeah, because we have one more question and then we're going to wrap it up. Go ahead.
I'll answer
David,
in
please
3
tell me,
words.
What do you think was happening here?
Read my next book.
Read your next book. Very good, very good. Alan.
I want to make a psychological point. CIA had all the means to silently kill JFK. They could have done it very easily. There is a mafia mentality of mental effing, doing it in such a bravado way to deliver a message to the world, and that was very obvious. They did it in a spectacular way, and they documented it. Lucien Conin, Vietnam station chief, was photographed with JFK at Daley Plaza. Not only that, that photograph, AP photograph, was circulated around the world as a message to everybody. You know who did it. We did it. We're very proud. We want the world to know who's the boss. That's the psychological message. They could have done it very easily.
Alan, they could have killed Jack in the White House in the dead of night, but no one would have believed it wasn't a conspiracy. They had to do it in public with hundreds of spectators so the world could see for itself. It wasn't a conspiracy because they could edit the evidence, they could manufacture the outcome, they could frame Oswald, all of which they did in many of the ways David has made so brilliantly clear through painstaking research. I don't think anyone else in the world could have done it but that man.
We have one more question.
Okay.
Jack Ruby's was from here in New Orleans too, but I think Jack Ruby killed Oswald to keep him from speaking. But then they said they killed John F. Kennedy because he was doing too much for the blacks. But also, I do a lot of problem solving. They talk about this, that, and that, and you said his motorcade was first with the top down. It should have been in the middle. Well, the conspiracy shouldn't you go to the person who arranged the motorcade setup and who authorized the top to be down? I think they killed a driver. They had to kill a driver to keep him from moving the car so they could continue on shooting that Kennedy. But as kicks, they must have went around Jackie Kennedy because the driver was in front of Jackie Kennedy, was it?
No.
The driver wasn't.
No, it's very easy to tell. I mean, it's a popular belief, just as we have the idea Jackie shot Jack, and just as we have the idea Secret Service agent accidentally shot him in the back of the head, which, by the way, would only account for one. I mean, the man was hit 5 times.
But she would have got shot.
There was no wound that Jackie could have inflicted. She loved Jack Kennedy.
No,
She
no,
held him in her-
I'm saying
She
is-
held him in her arms all the
No,
way.
I'm saying-
As far as Greer is concerned, looking at the limousine from the back, Greer's at the left front. Jack is at the right rear. If Greer shot Jack, his brains go out to the right rear. Instead, they went out to the left. So Greer didn't shoot Jack either, though William Cooper, who was a pretty smart guy and understood a lot, got that one wrong.
But who was the driver?
William Greer.
Yeah, but he was shot, wasn't he?
No.
He wasn't shot?
The claim was that Greer shot Jack. He's supposed to have turned around with a silver-plated .45 and shot Jack.
But why y'all don't go up to the person who set up this arrangement for the motorcade? They have never talked about where the motorcade procession, if you say he should have been in the middle, but he was in the front, no one never went to that person and find out why did you arrange that motorcade that way?
Look.
Huh?
I did a show with John B. Wells. I mean, this
Which
must
is
have been,
abnormal.
listen to me, 10 years ago. He asked me one question about JFK, and I spoke for 3.5 hours to answer his question, okay? 3.5 hours. John B. liked that so much he put it out in public, but he makes money, you know, from subscriptions. As far as we know, the head of the Secret Service detail was involved in it, and he was a guy who would have had responsibility there. We know the head of the Secret Service back in the White House was involved, but the key player behind the entire assassination was Lyndon Baines Johnson.
And that's what they say. That's what they say too. But I'm trying to say the motorcade setup. I know what you're saying, but the setup of the motorcade, I'm trying to pinpoint something. Because although the conspiracy is there, I do believe a lot of conspiracy, and I believe the CIA is capable, but a lot of other people, like you say. But the motorcade setup, what individual or what person was responsible for the motorcade setup? Because if he was in the front car, and that's abnormal. Normally you say he should be in the middle. Why was he placed in that front car with the thing down?
Look, it was to it was to make it easier for the shooters so they wouldn't get confused. This was a very peculiar motorcade. Normally, a presidential motorcade is all uniformly black Cadillac limousines. This was vehicles of many different makes and models and different colors. That's so the conspirators would know where everyone was in the motorcade. But to make it simpler for the assassins, they put Jack right out front. Anyone with familiarity with presidential motorcades knows that's wrong. They even sent Fletcher Prouty, who would never have gone along with this, off to the South Pole on a ceremonial occasion where he was in Christchurch, New Zealand, when they already had a report with a portrait-quality photograph of Oswald as a lone assassin, just as we got Jerry explaining how McGeorge Bundy had notified the cabinet that had been sent off to the Pacific to get him out of the way, that it was Oswald who did it before Oswald had even been arrested. I mean, it's just, they overplayed their hand, which is one of the tells that this was a contrived, very sophisticated conspiracy. And look how long they got away with it. Look how long they got away with it. It's absolutely stunning.
Wow.
And that's why an event like this, Make America Honest Again, is so important. We've got to expose the whole shebang, all of it, hook, line, and sinker, right down to Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Very well, Dr.
Thank you.
Fisker. Very well. Y'all give him a hand. You know, I want to say this, is that it's so important, before Mr. King speak, that we have people like all of these brilliant speakers here today. It's all about the cover-up. He made it so clear in his speech about cover-up. And we're going to say some more to that. Y'all just hold tight. Go ahead, Terry. Introduce our next. You know what's coming next?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fetzer. I really appreciate that. To be honest with you, I'm starting to get the impression that there was a lot of people that didn't like John Kennedy. This all happened before I was born. Thank you for that. We're now going to move to our next speaker, which is a video that appeared on Netflix with Ralph Sink. Ralph Sink founded the Oswald Innocence campaign with Jim Fetzer and Larry Rivera and proved that Lee Harvey Oswald was in the doorway of the Texas School Depository, which we saw a photo of that earlier, as the motorcade passed. He also directed and produced Dovey's Promise, which is a movie about the organized silencing of Mary Pinochet, JFK's mistress.
Is John F. Kennedy and Mary Pinchot Meyer. So Mary knew JFK? Well, she more than knew him. She was his friend, lover, and closest confidant in this world.
Did you murder Miss Meyer? So who could it have been?
Look, either it was organized crime or some dark cell within the government, and probably the CIA.
This case is a travesty. And if Mr. Hampman finds it compelling, he should be disbarred.
Objection, Your Honor.
There isn't going to be an appeal because I'm not going to lose. And that's a promise.
All right, we'll see. Step back. Defense counsel, you may make your closing statement to the jury.
Go ahead, Terry. We wanted. Yes,
Yes,
Dr.
yes,
Christopher,
please
here,
do.
I have the mic. We just want you to just have a few comments about the films. We're waiting on our students and their name.
Yeah. Well, that short guy was Ralph Sinkay. That short guy was Ralph Sinkay. Now, Jack did have dalliances with a lot of women, including Marilyn, but he doesn't appear to have been a great lover. Angie Dickinson said her affair with JFK was the greatest 15 seconds of her life. And he did these things. If you want to read a wonderful book about Hollywood, Marilyn and Jack, it's called Marilyn at Rainbow's End by Darwin Porter. Absolutely brilliant. I think he explains exactly how Marilyn was taken out. But in the process, you learn a lot of fascinating things about Brando, James Dean, a whole lot of, and Jack and Bobby. Now, this thing with Mary Pinchot Myers, she was married to Cord Meyer, who was a second in the chain of command, going from, according to E. Howard Hunt, from Lyndon to Cord Meyer. Well, this is Cord Meyer's ex-wife. Jack had a very profound relationship with. It was a romance, it was sexual to the extent Jack was a lover, but it was much more spiritual. And they were very worried about Mary having a diary that could be exposing, lots of things going on that the government didn't want to be revealed. And they assassinated her, and guess what? James Jesus Angleton wound up back at her house searching for a diary. And those of you who know, James Jesus Angleton was the head of counter-espionage for the CIA. He had all kinds of ties with Israel. He was quite a piece of work, and the fact that he was there. Ralph Sinkay is a brilliant guy, very controversial because he's so feisty and he takes stands, and he's very unrelenting in arguing for his stands, even when he may be wrong. But let me give you one illustration, because it came up about Ruby shooting Lee. It wasn't Ruby who shot Lee. Ruby was standing in a room upstairs in his underwear because they'd taken his clothing and put it on an FBI agent by the name of James Bookhout, who was the guy who actually shot Lee in that doorway, in that basement. I mean, Ralph Sinkay, I'm sorry he couldn't be here, is a fascinating guy, and I don't want to underestimate him. We've had our differences, but he has so much to contribute. He's been very provocative, and I admire the guy in spite of our differences. Anyway, that's a background to this. Is about the Mary Pinchot Meyer trial, because they tried to blame it on a black man who was totally innocent in order to conceal it.
Thank you very much.
We're running out of time. Thank you. Go ahead, Terry. We'll get you, David. Can you? Can you make it real brief? Because we got to get the students up here. Okay, great.
I usually keep my comments very specific and to the point. I don't see any point to haranguing. Peter Janney wrote the definitive book called Mary's Mosaic about this whole case. Peter is one of my friends. He accompanied me to the sixth floor museum, so I trust Peter. Peter knew Mary Myers' family well. Her son was his best friend for years. So Peter was devastated about Mary's death. He was very close to her. Peter's father worked for the CIA. Oh, too many coincidences. Yes, Peter's father, Wistar Janney, worked for the CIA. The day of Mary's death, Wistar Janney knew that Mary had been killed by mid-afternoon. Now think about this. The victim was not officially identified until later that day. How could he know in mid-afternoon that Mary was dead when her body wasn't even officially identified until late in the day? There, I didn't harangue, did I?
Thank you
Thank
for
you
that,
very
David.
much.
Give him a hand.
As we move on in our presentation today, we have a lot of students who are going to be making some presentations, and they're going to be introduced by Dr. Ashraf Esmail. If you can come on up, I'd appreciate it, who's a professor at Dillard University.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I do want to thank Dr. Solorian, Belinda, Elizabeth for inviting me to this event. Belinda had called me during Christmas break and said, we're having this World Honesty Conference on January the 4th. And I said, that's next week. And I said, can you get your students there? I said, no, they're on Christmas break, and you're not going to even get me there on January the 4th. And so I do appreciate them kind of reevaluating and the date to allow us to come. And also, even before this event, getting to know Dr. Solorian the last couple of weeks has been an honor. And certainly this event, when you're talking about, and I'm not an expert in JFK or Martin Luther King assassination, so we've learned quite a bit today or this afternoon, and hope to learn more. And government controversy and government cover-up is nothing new. We know it's out there and it exists every day. Most of it we never learn about, and then we hear experts like amongst yourselves that really kind of share, the actual truth that are actually covered up. I met Belinda. We work a lot on police brutality issues, and I will share. I'm the director for the Center for Racial Justice at Dillard University. And we started this center in 2020 after the George Floyd murders. The Board of Trustees felt that the university needed to get much more involved in community, racial, social justice types of issues. And they presented the idea to me, and I thought it was wonderful for us to go out there and work on these types of issues. This focus of this forum was on terrorism and government transparency. I'm Islamic by faith and Arab American by ethnicity. Certainly as a Palestinian, I have dealt with my share of issues, family members overseas with Intifada since 1947. A lot of my family members have migrated here, and we've sort of lost our country, in all honesty. I have visited multiple times Palestine and, being occupied. I think people in the U.S. don't recognize that they have freedom, and if you want to live in occupation, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And to be able to lose language and culture has been very difficult for my children. And so, as we started the center, and I told the board of trustees, certainly I'm not African American, but certainly as Arab American, we all have dealt with our injustices personally and obviously worldwide, as we've seen with genocide, as Dr. Saren has provided. We've seen 36,000 people, innocent people, lose their lives in the last year and a half. That really should not happen. Should not happen. And so, as a person of faith, and we talked earlier, someone mentioned the lack of family, lack of faith. I think this country has lost faith, family. The breakup of the family has been a hot topic around this country. The loss of faith has been a hot topic around this country. I think we're kind of losing our way that we need to kind of come back to. We need to go back to the 10 Commandments, the values and simple things that we've just kind of completely lost. We're just doing what we want when we want, and I don't think that works anymore. We've got to come back to the basic morals, basic values. And so as we have worked the last 4 years on issues of police brutality, poverty, I've worked with a lot of people on human trafficking. I mean, things that people don't even hear about on the news. It's just devastating what is going on. Missing children, 800,000 missing children go out every year, but do we hear about these kinds of things? No, we don't. And these are the things that we're trying to work, not only myself and my staff, but we involve the students in our community to engage in. We're fortunate to be able to get some funding, $1 million grant, a $5 million endowment, and things that kind of really people believe in these kinds of things. And I'm able to not only work in the community, but have all of our students in the community working on these types of issues as well. We're sort of obviously confined in a university, but we're doing the best we can in terms of going out there and making a difference. And one of the things that's been such a pleasure in doing work in this magnitude is meeting folks like yourselves and Dr. Slorkin and Belinda, Elizabeth, is day in and day out in the networking that we've done and kind of working on things, again, like domestic violence and things that are just really very prevalent issues in our city, in our country, in our world. And I'm very thankful and very fortunate. Sometimes I don't really recognize, we get angry and frustrated about the simplest of things, and it's just really, we recognize in the larger scheme of things, they're just inconsequential. And so I've been put in a position to impact social change. We've heard from many speakers today working on things impacting social change. And so we are thankful for that, and we look forward to working with Dr. Sorian in the future and things that he's doing and he believes in. Because when we talk about genocide and slavery and things of this nature, these are still prevalent problems. We think they were in the past, but no, they are currently still current problems that we need to work on. And so today, I'm very thankful to be here. My students were able to work on several of their projects that they want to share, give them a minute to kind of present some of the work that they're doing in terms of looking at these types of issues. So we're going to give them a minute to present. And again, I thank you all for allowing us to be here to present and to, again, learn more about the kinds of things that are going on that, again, are going to be very shocking. But again, the truth needs to be told, as they say. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Professor. Let's have the students come on up. Yeah, give them a hand. We love you, Professor Ishmael, and we love Dillard University and the great work that you're doing with our students. All of you students come on up to the stage, and we're going to line up, and we're going to go one by one. And I'm going to hold the mic for you. Come on down here to the end. Get everybody up here. Wow, you all look so great. Who wants to go first?
So hello everyone, my name is Olivia Wilson. I'm a senior criminal justice major at Dillard. And to talk very briefly, my project was about America, mass incarceration, and this new form of what they call modern day slavery. So firstly, I talked about past implications in the history of immediately following slavery, the earliest forms of our criminal justice system. So I discussed the Black Codes as well as Jim Crow era legislation. And the interesting things about the Black Codes and this type of legislation is that they directly targeted Black Americans and were basically systems of oppression for Black Americans. And so what's interesting is that in the present day, with the prison industrial complex, slavery is abolished except for as punishment as a crime. And so you have many people who are prisoners right now in essentially this new era of slavery. And our prison system disproportionately affects Black Americans as opposed to white Americans. I have some research here that shows that even though crime rates have gone down steadily over the past 2 decades, incarceration rates continue to rise. And within those incarceration rates, Black and brown people are arrested and prosecuted at alarmingly higher rates than white people. And so, in talking a little bit about the future, essentially, if legislation is not passed to address these issues, then we will have a new era of slavery in full force. And so my suggestions were to vote, of course, it's important to vote, and elect leaders. Currently, the abolition amendment is in the works in some states in the United States, and that's looking to outlaw slavery in all forms, including as punishment for a crime. Yeah.
Thank you. Give her a hand.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raven Ducree. I am a junior criminal justice major, and my topic basically covers how historical slavery is linked with human trafficking. A fun fact: if human trafficking was a country, it would be the third in economy. Yeah, that's a fun fact. Another thing is that human slavery and human slavery is basically a legacy when it comes to human trafficking. You know, at the beginning of slavery, people were treated like property. There was raped, killed, free labor and everything. And it's kind of like this now with human trafficking. People are being used like property. They're being raped. They're being slaughtered, and other bad things to them that are very detailed. So yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Viaja Johnson. I'm a junior attending Dillard University, criminal justice major and English minor. My presentation was on From Captivity to Freedom, the Journey of the Enslaved Peoples. We all know the basic history behind slavery, such as institutionalized slavery became prominent or started in America in 1619, and it continued through on out for centuries and even on now, like my other colleagues have said. However, I decided to capture the present details of it, such as Black Lives Matter that was established in 2013 that holds protests to raise awareness about social injustices and inequalities, and also like the ratification of June 19th becoming Juneteenth, and that's just, two important historical events that have happened for us African Americans to get some form of acknowledgement for the many things that we have been through. Even looking more into the future, we face many limitations, both federally and on a state level, whenever it comes to our education, which is the most important factor as it relates to young scholars in learning about American history, specifically pertaining to slavery. With that being said, we know that DEI, or diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, are being targeted at the moment, which affects many people's educations on a state level and a federal level, or, as a country. In addition to the critical race theory being taken out of education in Louisiana specifically, which removes the race aspect that many scholars need to know about in order to understand the impacts of slavery and systemic racism. And we just need to continue to know, or we just need to continue to fight against the many barriers that we have set, because justice and equality is an ongoing fight, and it's just important to know that we must gather together to make sure our future generations know the American history and the truth behind it in order for all of us to be successful. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shaylin Owens. I'm a criminal justice major, and my presentation is on the forensic fraud and the role of criminal investigation. So basically, everyone knows what forensic fraud is, right? So forensic fraud is when the forensic examiner, they falsify information to get unfair that's when, to get an unfair judgment from the court. So basically, Fred Kane, it was a case. He was a forensic examiner who falsified kidnaps and rapes over 137 men who were entitled to a reopen just because he felt like they did it. Overall, I think we should, invest in AI forensic fraud examiner where they can just see, so you can stop the human errors and the falsification of DNA testing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Willie Green Jr. I'm a criminal justice major from Houston, Texas. And I'm going to just read my conclusion. I did my presentation on the injustices in Palestine. The story of Palestine is one of resilience and struggle. While its past is marred by colonization and conflict, the present reflects ongoing efforts towards self-determination and peace. The future of Palestine is uncertain, but offers opportunities for resolution through diplomatic engagement, grassroots movement, the international solidarity. The path forward requires addressing historical grievances and building sustainable frameworks for coexistence.
Hi, everybody. My name's Jackson Shear. I'm a junior at Dillard and a criminal justice major. I did my project on a past, present, future of Germany. Obviously, Germany has a very dark past with the Holocaust and other things that happened there. And then moving to the present day, their age is growing, their average age in the country is growing since people don't want to move there with the dark past. People are moving away. What else did I say here? So I said they're trying to rectify their mistakes through things that they're doing present day. They're still paying out, on average, $535 million per year to the families of those who died in the Holocaust. And these are all steps that they're taking to rectify the past mistakes. And then the future of Germany is not bright, as their economic outlook is declining as the population age is rapidly increasing. So their average age right now is about 45. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Hi, so my presentation is over the heroin epidemic. And the beginning of the epidemic was in the 1990s, of course, when they started pushing drugs into our communities. And the future is kind of gotten away from heroin a little bit, but it's still an ongoing problem in our communities. And our present day, it doesn't look as bad as it used to, but it's still an issue. And hopefully we're able to address it and save more lives. Thank you.
Wow, let's give him another hand. You know, it means a lot that we can have our young people do such a fantastic presentation such as this and dig up the history and also bring us the present, not just the past, but the present and the future. So let's give them another hand. Thank you all, Dillard University. Professor Ashmiel, why don't you come? Is there anything else that you would like to say about your phenomenal students? You know, I think this is, this is the conclusion of our conference. We're gonna finalize this conference with Dr. Solarian. Are you gonna do your PowerPoint presentation? His final words, and for him to give us, you know, his overall consensus on what have happened here today and what this really means to us to have honesty, integrity, and transparency in our government. Thank you, Dr. Solarian.
Thank you, Belinda. This whole conference is about one thing, and it's the beginning. It's about governmental honesty and transparency. That is the problem we have experienced, and that's the problem. I think it's fixable. I think we can have governments that will be accountable and transparent. And this was also the vision of JFK. He insisted on governmental honesty and transparency and accountability. And I think this is not only JFK, MLK, Eisenhower, Truman wanted. Presidents wanted the same thing. And this is a journey that we have begun. In 1 month, we have a dream conference as a follow-up for this, where 1,000 churches around the world are going to ring their bells, and we're going to sing Ode to Joy, the principle, the mission of justice, fairness, openness, and equality. This conference is all about, supported by science and the scientific presentations that we have heard. So I thank everybody, in particular our American treasures. You guys are American treasures. Jerome, I want you to know that. You are a treasure. Jim, you've been abused. You've been abused by the system, all right? I think 50 years from now, there will be statues all over, all right? I'm telling you, and David, you too, and Ralph as well. So thank you for the spirit, and for a second, the locals, the kids left us, you know, but it's the kids. It's the kids I want to thank, and Dillard University, and Ismail, Ashraf, where is he? Gone. No. I want us to know that you made this conference possible. Thank you, Belinda. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Solarian. We love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Terry, why don't you give us the final words and close it out?
All of this has kind of reminded me of one of my experiences. I'm a Rotarian. Every Friday at lunch, we all get together and we say the four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? If we all live by that, the truth will come through in everything that we do. The students are in the next room. They've prepared a whole bunch of different posters for their research that they've worked on, and we're inviting everyone to go over there and enjoy that and network with some of them as well. But thank you very much for inviting me to participate, and Belinda.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day. Get ready for our cocktail later on tonight. We're going to be having Oliver Thomas, our councilman for the city of New Orleans is going to be our speaker. So that's tonight at the cocktail at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is a fantastic conference on our silent heroes, and also the people who helped us discover the silent heroes. We have the good fortune of having them in this room with us. These are special names that we should recognize. David Mantik, Jerry Corsi, Jim Fetzer, Ralph Sink. These are the people who made it possible for JFK and MLK records to be accessible to the public, for all of us to read. They're our records, and they've been kept secret from us for the last 60 years, thanks to the scholarly work of my friend. Thank you, David. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My paintings are not paintings. there are stories telling us what happened, some unspeakable things that are shameful for us to remember. And that's why, in fact, some of my family members are not here. They are ashamed of the content of what we will be discussing. But here is, for instance, MLK. MLK was a great human, a voice of unity, a voice of peace and understanding and justice, and also courage. And now he was killed. We have not been told how and why we killed, but I will let my fellow speakers tell you what really happened. There are stories about JFK, the wonderful life they had, and what happened after they were killed. Now, I think this picture actually, or photo painting, explains it all. It's my imagination of what would have happened to Washington if we did not have Kennedy as our president, our 35th president, who stopped the nuclear war, did not listen to General LeMay and other generals who were recommending nuking Russia and Cuba. Had we done this, we would have been nuked, 1/3 of Washington would have gone. And this how it would have looked in Washington. Oh, this is a sad picture of Daley Plaza. And another silenced hero, Lee Harvey Oswald, and Louisiana boy, New Orleans, Louisiana boy, age 17, joined the Marines and then joined the CIA. How do we know this? Do you know any Louisiana boy at age 17 who would speak fluent Russian at a young age when he met his future wife, Marina? Marina thought he was Russian born. And then we killed him. And we covered up. There's a museum today, the most popular museum in Dallas, Texas, that tells us that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone killer. It's not true. Please follow the presentation of David Mantik, Jerry Corsi, and Jim Fetzer, and hear the truth from them, the scientific truth. Symbolically, this painting represents the outcome of the Vietnam War and the injuries we suffered. That's the wheelchair. It's a symbolic representation. And this is actually my grandson, Oscar. I imagine what would have happened to Oscar had we not listened. Thanks to President Kennedy. These are very tragic, sad, upsetting pictures. This is the agony of pain. Let's start again. My leg. This is a picture of tragedy in Vietnam. And why Vietnam? Because we killed Kennedy. Because we killed Kennedy, then we had to kill a lot of Vietnamese and 58,000 Americans. That's the sad thing. My lay. I mean, when I look at this picture, I shudder. The bombs. A picture of the assassination. Oh, let me tell you about the wonderful people, the wonderful victims.